Welcome to the first virtual hearing for the inquiry into the impact of technological and other change on the future of work and workers in New South Wales. Before I commence, I'd like to acknowledge that we are the Gadigal people who are the traditional custodians of this land on which Parliament sits. I would also like to pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Eora Nation and extend that hearing to that respect to other Aboriginals who are present. Today's hearing is being conducted as a fully virtual hearing. This enables the work of each committee to continue during the COVID-19 pandemic without compromising the health and safety of members, witnesses and staff. As we break new ground with the technology, I would just ask for everyone's patience for any technical difficulties we may encounter today. If participants lose their internet connection and are disconnected from the virtual hearing, they are asked to rejoin the hearing by using the same link as provided by the Committee Secretariat. Today, we will be hearing evidence from a number of on-demand platforms, including DoorDash, Easy and Mable. Later, representatives of the Australian Services Union and the Health Services Union will give evidence to the committee. Before we commence, I would like to make some brief comments about the procedures for today's hearings. While parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses giving evidence today, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of their evidence at the virtual hearing. I therefore urge witnesses to be careful about comments you may make to the media or to others after you complete your evidence. Committee hearings are not intended to provide a forum for people to make adverse reflections about others under the protection of parliamentary privilege. In that regard, it's important that witnesses focus on the issues raised by the inquiry's terms of reference and avoid naming individuals unnecessarily. All witnesses have a right to procedural fairness according to the Procedural Fairness Resolution adopted by the House in 2018. There may be some questions that a witness could only answer if they had more time or with certain documents to hand. In these circumstances, witnesses are advised that they can take a question on notice and provide an answer within 21 days. Today's proceedings are being broadcast live and a video recording will be available on YouTube afterwards. Also, a transcript will be placed on the committee's website once it becomes available. Finally, just a few notes on virtual hearing etiquette to minimise disruptions and assist our Hansard reporters. Can I ask committee members to clearly identify who questions are directed to, and could I ask everyone to please state their name when they begin speaking? Could everyone please mute their microphones when they are not speaking? Please remember to turn your microphones back on when you're getting ready to speak, and if you start speaking whilst muted, please start your question or answer again so it can be recorded in the transcript. Members and witnesses should avoid speaking over each other so we can all be heard clearly. Also, to assist Hansard, may I remind members and witnesses to speak directly into the microphone and to avoid making comments when your head is turned away. I now welcome our first witnesses. First, could I start with Ms. Burrows? Could you please state your full name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation from the card that has been emailed to you by the Secretariat?
Sure. I'm Rebecca Burrows. I'm the General Manager of DoorDash here in Australia. I will swear an affirmation. Sorry, I'm just trying to find that in my email. So I'm not sure that I've received the affirmation card via.
That's okay. I might just read it to you, and if you wish to repeat it after me. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm.
I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
That the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Ms. Burrows. And I will now ask Mr. Fernando to also state your full name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation from the cards that have been emailed to you by the Secretariat.
Pajitha Fernando, Senior Manager, Strategy and Operations for DoorDash Australia, and I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernando. Would either of you like to start by making a short opening statement?
It's Rebecca Burrows here. I do have a short opening statement to read. Thank you, Chair.
Please.
I'd first like to thank this select committee for inviting us to offer insight into the future of work in New South Wales. Our mission at DoorDash is simple: to empower local economies. We do this by enabling local businesses to better serve consumers' expectations of ease and immediacy and thrive in today's convenience economy. By building the last mile logistics infrastructure for local commerce, DoorDash is bringing communities closer, one doorstep at a time. DoorDash launched here in Australia in 2019, and we currently operate in all states and territories, serving over 5,500 businesses in New South Wales and further reaching over 80% of the Australian population. We're proud that in just 2 short years, we've been able to connect so many Australians across the country with their favourite local merchants. Our founder, Tony Shu, immigrated to the United States as a young child. As his father studied at university, his mother worked up to 3 jobs at a time to support the family, including one in a Chinese restaurant, where young Tony washed dishes alongside her and learned how hard it is for small businesses to make it, even in the best of times. It also underscored the importance of supplemental work opportunities, like those that DoorDash now offers to tens of thousands of Australians working to make ends meet and get ahead. We especially appreciate the opportunity to introduce the committee to the over 40,000 couriers that use our platform, called Dashers, over 10,000 of whom dash in New South Wales. DoorDash serves as a vital source of supplementary income for these stay-at-home parents, students, small business owners, and others, most of whom work for brief periods of time on the platform. On average, Australian dashers work less than 3 hours a week on our platform, and many regularly exercise the option to pause work for weeks or months at a time. Overall, 83% of Australian dashers report that gig work is not their primary source of income. Rather, it is often a critical source of immediate and extra income that allows workers to cover an unexpected expense or ensure all their bills are paid on time. They choose to dash because the platform allows them to work when, where, and how they want, all while averaging more than $32 per hour when on delivery in New South Wales. As part of our mission to empower local economies, we are committed to continually working with government stakeholders, third-party experts, and most importantly, the Dasher community, to ensure we're implementing best practices designed to provide Dashers with opportunities to earn in a way that is best for them. We believe strongly in working with Dashers and take their feedback into account when considering how we can best support them on issues of concern. We maintain a regular dialogue with Dashers across the country and are constantly learning from them regarding ways we can improve the Dasher experience. We are in the process of comprehensively evaluating our safety programming, including ways that we can use our platform to raise awareness among Dashers and help them stay safe while dashing. We recently announced our participation in the development of Australia's first set of national food delivery platform safety principles, which outline our safety commitments over the next 11 months. While we already meet many of these benchmarks, we and others in the industry have pledged to continue to raise the bar for safety through continuing initiatives, technology, and research. We understand and appreciate the rightful interests of the committee in rider and driver safety while delivering for DoorDash, and of any unfortunate fatalities that may have occurred while delivery partners were on the DoorDash platform. We can confirm that there have been, unfortunately, 2 fatalities in Melbourne since DoorDash commenced business in Australia 2 years ago. One fatality occurred in October 2020 while the Dasher was using our platform. We provided immediate financial assistance to his family and access to our insurance policy. This is now being processed as a work cover claim in Victoria. The other fatality occurred last September, also in Victoria. We continue to investigate the circumstances of this accident. What we know is that we could have escalated this matter internally more quickly and maintained closer contact with his family. We sincerely regret that and have implemented improved policies and procedures. We are now addressing this matter as a priority and working to support his family. We've recently contacted his family to offer financial support, and we continue to offer our assistance. We continue to refine our internal processes, which have already been updated to a more rigorous standard, and maintain our commitment to the safety of Dashers by building on our existing efforts to improve safety. Any incident that occurs on our platform is heartbreaking, and we take the safety of all Dashers and the entire community very seriously. Platforms like DoorDash provide a critical source of supplemental income to workers in New South Wales, allowing them access to flexible work when they need it. We believe it is critically important to protect this new form of work while ensuring workers receive the safety protections they deserve. We know that to empower local economies, we must work together with the communities we serve, And that is why we remain committed to collaborating with Dash's government and elected leaders and industry and third-party stakeholders to help promote the safety and economic vitality of our community. We look forward to continuing engagement with the committee on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burrows, for your opening statement. Is it possible, if you haven't already, just to email that through to the Secretariat for Hansard purposes? I'm just going to start by asking just a few questions before I pass to my colleagues. I probably might start just with respect to the disclosure about the death that took place last year. Just to confirm, the October death is known, but the second death is not known. Is that fair?
Yes, I'll talk to each of them briefly. So the fatality that occurred in October has been known and has been reported and discussed. This fatality occurred in Melbourne, and we have been in conversation with his family. We provided assistance to his family in terms of an interim payment and some funeral expenses, and have provided access to our insurance policies, and a claim has been approved. His family have since lodged a work cover claim, which was just brought to our attention in the last week or so, could be just over a week. And so that's kind of the current status of that claim, or of that incident. The second incident that I mentioned in my statement occurred in September 2020. And this has come to light in detail most recently as we've been auditing all past incidents, partly in preparation to meet with you today, but also as part of our comprehensive review of safety that we are undertaking. This fatality occurred, as I said, in September 2020, and the Dasher was not on our platform at the time of the incident. We had some early contact from his family, and that contact ceased. And I guess the position at the time from all parties, it wasn't disputed, was that he was not on our platform. As we've gone in and looked at this incident ourselves, we have brought that into question, as he had been on the platform earlier in the evening and had completed a delivery for DoorDash. And so we're just getting some more detail around the specific timings and so forth, to make sure that we have treated that incident appropriately. And we've recommenced contact proactively with his family to engage on that. It's very early days in terms of the discussions that we're having with his family. They've just recommenced recently. As an early indicator, we have offered a small payment, as we did with the other case, whilst we investigate, and we'll make all the relevant provisions available to them.
Just in respect to the second fatality, or the fatality that you just described, did the person meet the definition of being on trip?
So I will provide some more information, I guess, on notice as we garner exact information. I don't want to say anything that's in any way inaccurate, and we are early days looking. The first look at it, he was not on a trip. He completed a delivery for DoorDash, and then he had logged off our platform, from my understanding. But he had completed a delivery in that evening, and that's what we're just investigating in terms of the timing.
Okay. But it's fair to say that does DoorDash draw a distinction in terms of your obligations if a person's on trip or not on trip, or in terms of how you're reacting?
Yeah, so our insurance policy has a time. I will provide the policy on notice, but it is 15 minutes post trip, or when the driver has logged off the platform, which is in line with the rest of the industry, from what I understand. And so that is what we apply, and we are just checking that. That doesn't mean so the payment that we've made or offered to that Dash's family doesn't take into account that timing. So I don't know right now if what I do know is that he wasn't on an active trip and that he did log off our platform on that evening. What I don't know is the timing between those and, whether it was, 15 minutes, 20 minutes or 30 minutes. The payment that we've offered to the family in terms of a small immediate payment is made regardless of that. It's a goodwill payment rather than something under any insurance obligations or anything like that. And then it's more a matter of how we apply, or if and how we can apply the insurance. We also don't know if he was on any other platforms in the same evening. As I said, we're just trying to gather as much information as we can, as quickly as we can.
Look, I've just got two more questions on this before I pass to other committee members. But do you have details about is the person's age, and were they an experienced writer with your platform, or were they relatively new to the industry?
Let me just see what information I do have that I can provide on him. Just bear with me. So the information that I have is that he was 27 years old, and it was a car accident, and that, as I said, he was dashing in Melbourne. In terms,
Australian national, or
he was. I don't believe that he was an Australian national. The point of contact that we have is his brother, who is also living here in Australia. But if it's okay with you, I'll take it on notice and I'll provide some more detailed information on what we know about him and his background and so forth as it comes to hand.
Okay. Can I just look, the final question I have before I pass to committee members is, I mean, you would accept that not having knowledge of this for a year signals a system failure at DoorDash. Do you accept that?
I definitely accept that. My response, or our response, as we've gone back through all of our safety cases, is that this 100% could have been handled better in terms of an escalation, so that we would know these specific elements at the time. The contact ceased, I guess, with the early initial finding, and then the family also ceased contact with us. We've already got new processes in place to ensure that any incident like this is escalated immediately to operational leaders here within Australia, out of, I guess, the support process that someone would initially contact us with, and also with our trust and safety team globally. So I would agree that it's unfortunate that this wasn't escalated so that we could close out the incident one way or the other at the time. But we already have new processes in place that would ensure that hasn't happened again. We've gone back through every incident, which is how we've uncovered this since DoorDash commenced operation here in September 2019, to ensure that there aren't other incidents that should have been escalated that have not.
So just final question then is, I understand that you may have improved the procedures around escalation and investigation and notification, but given that there were 2 deaths in the same city within a month of each other, can you explain what steps you've taken to improve actual safety and the prevention measures that are in place now as a result of these 2 fatalities?
Yes, so I would probably point there to the national safety principles that we have signed up to, and the steps that we've taken to ensure consistency and, I guess, a raising of the bar of safety principles across the industry. And I think I've said previously in other forums that, we operate obviously in a very highly competitive industry, but safety is not something that I seek to be a competitive advantage. It's something that I think we should collaborate to ensure we have the right things in place and that we collectively raise the bar across the board. So, in those principles, there's elements around the training and information that we provide dashers, the onboarding processes that dashers go through, the advice that we provide dashers in their context as independent contractors around equipment. We have provided some free equipment in addition to what we previously did for our dashers. And we have, I guess, an ongoing program of work, holding a mirror to ourselves to improve those in line with these standards, and also, what we can do, I guess, above these standards.
Go to Mr. Searle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Adam Searle, welcome, Ms. Burrows. I just wanted to talk about some of the things in your written submission. I think it's at the top of page 2. You talk about the average earnings being $32 per hour when on trip. Can you tell us what is the typical number of hours and the average earnings over that period of time? So how do you get that average of $32 an hour?
Thanks for your question. So I'll talk at a high level, and then I might hand to Mr. Fernando, who probably has more detail than me on this. The $32 an hour, so when we say on trip, we track that from when a driver accepts a delivery, and so the time that they are then active on the platform, and that is the average earnings, in that time. So, you could log on to the DoorDash platform. We send you a delivery, and you choose to accept that delivery, and we then track from there your average earnings over the next hour in this case.
We'll maybe provide us whatever documents you can on notice. I've got some other questions. Further down that same page, you say between March and September last year, 17,000 new dashers joined the platform. And that's in addition to the existing 40,000, is that right? So am I assuming that we should assume, therefore, there's about 57,000 dashers operating in that time period? Is that correct?
The 40,000 is our current number of dashers that we have active on the platform. We also attract...
Okay, just pause there, sorry. So what is the total number of dashers that you are referring to on page 2 then? Because you say more than 17,000 joined the existing number. Previous in your submission, you'd said the previous number was 40,000. So what's the total number that you're referring to?
I can provide that exact detail on notice if it's more useful.
Yeah, because my real question is, you say that the number of dashers earned more than $30 million in income. Do you have a more up-to-date figure than 30 million? Or is it about 30 million, just a little bit above? Is it like a lot more above?
That's an approximate number. So for any exact numbers, let me see what I can get you on notice, and I'll provide that.
Okay, well, just if you divide 30 million by, well, I thought it was 57,000 dashes, but if you divide it by 40,000 dashes, that's not a lot of earnings per person over the March to September period. Is that how we should read that evidence?
That is how that should be read. And I guess what I would just refer to is, as I stated in my opening statement, the majority of dashers, this is not their primary income, it's supplementary income. So, as I've said, an average of, 3 hours that they may be dashing, to top up wages, or where they're unable to work in their current role to supplement their income.
Yeah, sure. But Ms. Burrows, if it's 40,000 dashers earning $30 million over 6 months, that's $750 average earnings. If you divide that by 6 months, they're earning very, very little per month on average. So I'm just trying to square that evidence with your $32 an hour earnings. I mean, these numbers are not adding up for me. So perhaps on notice, unless you can give us a clear and cogent explanation, the figures I'm reading here are pretty exploitative of your workforce, even allowing for the fact that this is not their main source of income. It looks highly exploitative to me, and I'm open to be persuaded otherwise, but the information you've provided here, it doesn't do that.
Let me take that on notice, and we'll provide the detail.
Thank you.
Can I just supplement that, Mr. Searle? Just one quick question.
Yep.
Can you just explain how is a rider remunerated? Is it according to time worked? Is it according to trips delivered? And how do you set the rate? that determines a person's remuneration?
Pooji, are you able to provide some more detail on that?
I can. Thank you for the question. So the way that we calculate pay is based on a few different variables. So we do look at distance. We do look at estimated time to complete the trip, which includes live traffic estimates, as well as considers the vehicle that particular dasher is traveling on. We also do look at things like the geography and the area that the dasher's in to set that pay. So we have systems in place, but we also have our strategy and operations team who monitor those pay offers and how they're accepted by dashers as well. So there's a few variables that go into that to calculate the offer, which is given to the dasher for every trip.
So the question we asked other platforms, which we'll ask of you as well, is do you provide opportunities to either for an individual to bargain with you about their remuneration or for there to be collective bargaining with your organisation about wages and remunerations and conditions?
No, we don't have collective bargaining as part of our engagement with the dasher community. Dashers see information regarding the work that is available, when they're on shift, and then they are free to accept or not accept that delivery. And we do, and as Ms. Fernando's outlined, we do move the payments available based on conditions at the time and on the day. We do engage with dashers, I guess, in a obviously on an individual basis. There's plenty of people in our business that are engaging with dashers daily. We also have a dasher community council that we set up in January of this year, where we have a group of dashers that have come together to engage with us as a business on key issues, and they can range from each I guess engagement we have with them, from safety issues they're having with merchants, issues they're having with consumers, product enhancements that they'd like to see on the Dasher app to help them, safety, and obviously pay can come up in those conversations, but we don't have any collective bargaining or negotiations at that scale.
Sorry, Mr. Sell.
That's okay. I was going to ask about the National Food Delivery Platform Safety Principles you refer to, I think, on the final page of your submissions.
Yes.
Now, how long are they going to be in place for in the current form? There's a fair bit of criticism that they seem to be a fairly weak form of self-regulation, and they certainly don't deal with the pressure on your dashers to earn money in the time they have to deliver. So how do you think those principles actually meet the needs of your dashers and keep them safe?
So these principles that we collectively signed, the content within them, or the commitment that we've made, is that we will all collectively reach at a minimum these standards within 12 months. So it's probably now within 10 and a half or 11 months, given when we signed the principles. Mm-hmm. They, I guess, represent the first time that the industry has come together to collaborate and agree a set of standards that we can all align and agree on. That doesn't preclude any platform from going above and beyond those standards. So I guess if we look at them as the minimum principles that we would all adhere to and agree to, and I see them as a very positive step in terms of, I think, as I said earlier, I don't see safety as something that anybody should see as a competitive advantage. I believe very firmly in competition, and in fact, that's part of what DoorDash is here in Australia for. But safety being something that we all have, that is not a competitive advantage. It's something that we're all have an obligation and a commitment to. So I see it as a very positive step in terms of bringing the industry together to engage on this, and a minimum set of standards that we're working towards meeting together. In 12 months' time or 11 months' time, when that initial 12-month period is up, my intention and my expectation would be that we will have continued to engage and we would update these principles and all be looking to raise the bar together.
Okay, so that sounds like, you've made some progress. And in terms of the competitive advantage, obviously you would want all participants in your sector to sort of be subject to the same arrangements or same regime. Do you think, rather than this sort of fairly slow-paced self-regulation, we should perhaps recommend extending Chapter 6 of the Industrial Relations Act, which deals with transport work, to these sorts of activities that you and your competitors are engaged in, to provide a sort of a common framework for you all to operate in?
In terms of any comment on that particular regulation, I'd have to take that on notice for us to have a look at and provide any detailed commentary. But my view is that the best outcome would be for the industry. And when I say the industry, I don't just mean, the food delivery providers themselves, but stakeholders within the industry to engage and raise standards together. I think that is the ultimate outcome that you would want before something, or rather than having something that is imposed, that as good corporate citizens and good citizens, for us to come together and agree on principles and meet or beat those principles. So, in terms of the specific regulations that you refer to, we can definitely take that on notice and come back with any commentary. But in terms of, what I think should happen, I think the industry should collaborate with interested stakeholders, including elected officials, including government, including the dashers, including, the other players in the industry, to raise standards together.
Well, just on that, last year you signed the Transport Workers Union DoorDash COVID-19 response, I guess, heads of agreement, if I can term it that way. And two of the things that you touched on there was a commitment to dialogue and engagement regarding workers' interests. Can you inform the committee how that agreement is unfolding, and how are you discussing dasher interests with the Transport Workers Union around emerging risks and challenges for those workers?
I'm sure I'll make some comments, and then I might hand to Pooji, who's had some more engagement with the TWU over.
And then we'll go to Mrs. Housos after that.
Yep.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
I didn't. Sorry,
I just said that we will go to Mrs. Housos after the completion of this answer from Mr. Fernandez.
Okay.
Take the questioning, yes.
Sure. So, my understanding and of the agreement that was signed, with the TWU, was particularly around response for COVID, for the pandemic, in terms of provision of equipment, engagement, and so forth. And in my view, those things have been rolled out very effectively to the Dasher fleet, and we continue to provide those same provisions that we committed to at the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously, as the pandemic situation has emerged, we've had even greater engagement with Dashers around safety in restaurants, safety delivering to consumers, and their own safety and obligations under each of the government restrictions in all the jurisdictions. In terms of engagement with the TWU, that engagement does continue. We do have dialogue with the TWU on a fairly regular basis. And whilst, the Dashers are not an organised group within that, as part of the industry, we look forward to continuing that dialogue with the TWU. Pooji, I don't know if you have anything to add on the engagement that you've personally had with the TWU.
No, Rebecca, I think you've covered that. We continue to have that ongoing discussion with the TWU. Nothing further than that.
We'll go to Mrs. Housos now, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Ms. Burrows, Mr. Fernando. Can I go back to the very tragic death of the rider that you spoke about earlier? that you revealed this morning, how much is the small payment that's being offered to the family?
I'll take the amount on notice just because I don't want to be inaccurate, and I'm happy to provide that. But my understanding is it is between $10,000 and $15,000 US as that initial payment, whilst we continue to engage with the family. But I can provide the exact number on notice.
Okay, the $10,000 to $15,000 is significantly less than the WorkSafe amount in Victoria. If a worker dies in Victoria, the benefit that is usually paid out is, or will the benefit amount for October 2020 was $834,000 and $200. Sorry.
Yes, so
that
just
is
to be clear,
significantly lower.
Yeah, so if I can just clarify what that payment is. When we have one of these, a tragic incident or a fatality, our initial response before we look into insurances or other responses, so it's more an early payment to, I guess, relieve immediate challenges the family may be facing, is a payment that's made outside of access to our insurance and so forth. And so that is what this payment is. It's a short-term payment that we made, just as we similarly did for the other tragic fatality that occurred in October. That doesn't preclude access to our insurance policies, which would have a greater payment associated with it. So by all means, there's no indication here that is the end of our engagement. It's actually a short-term piece for the family whilst we go through investigations.
Okay, and was the death reported to WorkSafe in Victoria?
I'll take that on notice. As I said, this has only come to light. So when the incident occurred last September, I don't believe it was reported, but I would need to check. So let me come back to you on notice just to be 100% sure. But because it was closed out from us and from the family, as a driver having not been on our platform, I would need to just check that.
But just to be clear, Ms. Burrows, are you aware of the death being reported since this began? Since you uncovered the death in your preparations in appearing before this committee, are you aware of the death being reported to WorkSafe?
I'm not aware, so I'd like to take it on notice in terms of the actions that have been taken.
Okay. Can you provide us with some more details around the date or the location of the death?
Yes, I can. I do have some information to hand. And as I said earlier, as we uncover more information, I'm very happy to provide the detail on notice. But the information that I do have to hand is that this incident occurred on September the 5th, 2020, which was a Saturday in the evening, late in the evening, so around about 10:55 to 11 o'clock p.m. In Melbourne, and it was a car accident, and it occurred on the corner of Palmers Road and the Strand. So that's information that I have to hand. But as I've said, I'll take on notice to provide more information on the incident as we have it.
And I just want to come back to the question of support for the family. Are you proposing to provide anything more to the family of the man who died if the death was outside that 15-minute window?
That's what we are, as I said, we've remade contact with this man's brother this week. And are just looking to get some more engagement so that we can assess what support we can provide, would be helpful and that we can provide while we go through this assessment. And so, I'd have to take on notice what support we therefore do provide, but our intention is to, commence engagement. And I'm personally more than happy to be in contact with the Dash's brother as soon as we have some more engagement occurring.
Okay, and can you provide us with any further detail? You said that you don't know if the man who passed away was an Australian national. Are you aware of where his family is?
So his
brother is in Australia. You told us that. Are you aware of where else his family is?
I don't have to hand where the rest of his family
or where he is from.
I don't have that exact detail to hand, but I can provide it on notice.
And I just want to be
clear. Mr. Pearson after the Connie as well.
Sorry, just one final question. I just wanted to be clear when you talk about the 15-minute window, is the 15-minute window once they have completed the trip or once they have logged off the app?
I believe, sorry, I'll just grab that information so that I can be accurate. So it occurs, so the time window in terms of coverage is either when the Dasher logs off the DoorDash app or 15 minutes after their last delivery on the app. So we, and this is where we're just working through the detail. Obviously, we have the data around when the Dasher logged off the app and also when his last delivery was, and we're just working that through.
I'll pass to my colleague.
Mr. Pearson, your questions?
Yes. Thank you very much. Just for clarification, I'm just wondering, has the reviews of the two deaths been completely done by your company? Your internal review, Ms. Burrows?
Sorry, can I just clarify, when you say has the review of the incident occurred completely by DoorDash?
Yes, that's my question.
Right. So, so in terms of each of the incidents, so we do have an internal review process, and
yes, I understand that, but have they been completed?
No. So the October fatality, which is now subject to the work cover claim, our internal review is complete, and there is insurance available to that Dasher.
Okay, so just in relation to the review, was it found that there was any undue duress placed on the drivers by deadlines, pressure to get the meal or whatever it was to the destination? Was it found that there was any undue pressure or deadlines placed on the worker to force them to probably take any reckless risks to fulfill the deadline or deadlines?
No, that was not found in our investigations.
Okay. Can one of the drivers delegate a job to others once they've taken it on via the app?
Yes, Pooji, would you be in a position to talk about delegation?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the question. So we do allow Dashers the flexibility of subcontracting their work. The same safety expectations are applied to that subcontracted Dasher, and it's the obligation of the initial Dasher to make sure that all of those obligations are met.
And does your insurance cover the delegated person?
Yes, Mr. Pearson, it does. So the insurance remains automatically activated and the same levels of insurance. And also there are no additional costs for the delegation of that contracted work.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it from me.
We have one more minute, so I might just, unless Mr. Benasiak indicates an interest, just quickly, in respect to the broader safety audit that you referred to, how many serious injuries did it reveal in both New South Wales and other jurisdictions?
Yep. So our safety audit went back to the commencement of DoorDash in Australia, which is back to September 2019. And it revealed 41 incidents. Sorry, I'm just trying to, I'll just grab the information on the incidents. 41.
Just a time period? Yep.
Yep, since September 2019, 41 incidents. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my information on how many of those, on the classification of those. Sorry, one moment. Yep, so we had 41 incidents, safety incidents raised with us since September 2019. 15 of those that were classified as serious incidents. So serious incidents would be dashers who've sought medical attention and or were hospitalised. 10 of those were car accidents when a dasher was in a car and then admitted to hospital. And 5 of those were when they were on a bicycle and admitted to hospital.
Okay. And who is your insurance policy with?
Our insurance policy is with Chubb.
On detail, are we able to get either a copy of it or an explanation as to what it covers and what it, how it works, how it's been claimed as well? In respect, just the final question, I guess, is in respect to the known fatality which took place last year, has that family resolved their claim with the insurance company, or is that matter still ongoing?
That matter is still ongoing, and as I said earlier, it has come as a work cover claim over the last week to 2 weeks. Where we landed in terms of the insurance, we had the insurance is available to the family at our maximum rate. And we have been working with the family for them to, as they're overseas nationals, they need to lodge some paperwork to access that payment within Australia. And we've been providing them advice to do that. The last we heard directly from the family, they were preparing to lodge that paperwork so the payment could be made out by Chubb, but to my knowledge, that's not yet occurred.
Okay. Look, we'll call an end to it there. Thank you very much for your appearance. You have taken multiple questions on notice, for which you'll have 21 days to respond. Equally, committee members might have supplementary questions which will be put to you in writing, for which you'll also have 21 days to respond from the date of receipt of the transcript. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and we appreciate your appearance as well. We will now move to our next set of witnesses, and I'll just ask the Secretariat to admit them.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. We welcome our next set of witnesses. I might just, before we go into the formalities, just do a quick sound check to make sure that you can hear us clearly. Can you hear us clearly?
Yes.
Great. And can we please have each of you just test your microphones?
Of course.
Starting with
Hi.
Lou. Yep.
Hi.
Yep. Excellent. Well, we now welcome our next set of witnesses from Easy.
That's right.
I'm going to start by asking you to state your name and position, your full name and position title, and swear either an oath or an affirmation from the cards that have been emailed to you by the Secretariat. Starting with you, Miss Liu.
Sure. Yep, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sija Liu, Kitty. I'm the Compliance and Public Relations Manager at Easy. And should I say the affirmation now? Or?
Yes, now would be the time for you to say information. Yes.
Sure. So I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth.
Thank you very much. Can I please ask Mr. Wang to state your full name and position title and either take an oath or an affirmation? Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Helene Wang, and I go by Will, and currently I'm at Easy, function as a legal and investment manager.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Do you mind taking the oath or affirmation, please?
Yeah, sure. I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ho.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Yang Ho. I'm an Easy driver operation manager. Yep.
Great. Mr. Ho, do you mind taking either the oath or affirmation, please?
Yeah, I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. I understand that a fourth witness is sick and unable to appear. So just for other committee members' knowledge, that is why we have a panel of three as well. Would either of you like to start by making a short opening statement?
Yep, I'll be doing that. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, honorable ministers. Easy is honored to be here, being one of the selected committee participating in today's hearing, and to discuss how to create a better future of work towards our industry. Easy is an Australian e-commerce online food delivery platform established in late 2014, providing a marketplace to engage and interact with three groups of users: customer users, merchant users, and delivery users. We were founded in Melbourne and came to Sydney in early 2017 as the very first step of expansion, and now operating in 11 cities in Australia, including 2 in New South Wales, hence Sydney and Wollongong. In New South Wales specifically, Easy has roughly 2,000 registered merchant users and 5,000 delivery users. And on a daily basis, approximately 300 to 500 delivery users will be actively online looking for money-making opportunities. As an e-commerce company, Easy is focused on developing and providing the most advanced technology with intelligent algorithms to support and facilitate business transactions conducted through our platform for all three groups of users. On the other note, as an Australian company, Easy understands our social responsibility when engaging people in business and has been working proactively with Safe Work New South Wales to keep on building a better business environment that helps our delivery users to self-regulate and to stay safe. Throughout the pandemic, every food delivery platform, including Easy, has been a career hub for many who has lost their jobs from other industries, and there's no doubt food delivery drivers have been a lifeline to keep the community and other related industries open and running. Hence, in consideration of their safety and well-being, Easy shall continue working on necessary improvements, and we want to also call out on the government at the same time to provide more support and infrastructures, including more bike lanes and car park spaces where required, to allow this industry and gig economy as a whole to grow and better serve the general public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might start by just asking if possible for you to email that opening statement to the Secretariat if you haven't already. Thank you.
Yes, I have done that.
Thank you so much. I might just start by asking you just some very basic questions. Easy is a food delivery platform that specialises predominantly in Chinese and other Asian food delivery. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yes. And you said, how many people do you currently have as of today would be working for Easy?
In New South Wales, we have approximately 5,000 registered delivery users, but on a daily basis, because in consideration to the reality, about 300 to 500 delivery users will be actively online.
Sure. And are the specific geographies of delivery all of New South Wales?
We only deliver in Sydney and Wollongong. And in Sydney, we do not cover all suburbs, but mainly the CBD area, a bit of North Shore, and some other areas. We're happy to provide a list of suburbs that we're operating after the meeting if needed.
Thank you very much. Can you explain, in your treatment of this workforce, are they classified as independent contractors or are they classified as employees?
Well, to us, as we mentioned, we are an e-commerce company, so we regarded them as one of our group of users. They use our platform to looking for money-making opportunities.
So that can I infer, therefore, that they are treated as independent contractors from your perspective, or independent businesses?
In our knowledge, we regarded them as users, and in accordance to our terms and conditions when they are trying to register and accept it.
Okay. Do the people who ride for Easy work? Do they treat this as effectively a full-time employment?
No. In the nature of this particular industry, I believe all the delivery drivers, they have their own control in when, where, and how, which platform they want to associate with. Therefore, the majority of time they can work for multiple platforms at the same time.
Sure. Can you tell us what is the average remuneration on an hourly basis for a person who rides for Easy?
As we mentioned, because in terms of how we operate, we don't have hourly rates. They actually calculate it by how many orders they completed. So let me quickly explain how does Easy operate, if you don't mind. So when a customer user places an order through our platform, the order will be passed on to the merchant to review. If the merchant decided to accept the order and started preparation accordingly at the same time, this particular order will be throughout our smart hybrid system, to find a delivery user who is committed to perform this particular job. Hence, they head to our merchant to pick up the order and deliver to the customer's doorstep at a timely manner. So the customer users will make a payment on Easy app when they place an order, and then Easy would then settle the merchant for their food sales less the platform commission, and also settle the delivery user for their delivery service income less platform administration fee. So both settlement normally is conducted in a weekly manner, and both of merchant and our delivery users makes money as per each order they complete. In saying that, our delivery user with Easy in average makes about $8 to $9 per order, and they normally could complete about 4 to 5 orders within 1 hour. Generally, depends on it depends on the situation, the reason why is Easy adopts a smart algorithm system which allow our delivery users to do 2 to 3 pickups and drop-offs at the same route at once, which we think is more efficient, as well as producing higher value for their time and effort invested in this particular trip.
Do you offer any incentive payments or programs if a rider performs more trips per hour or more trips per set of time?
Well, Easy does provide extra subsidies to our delivery users when under severe weathers, or if they travel to a relatively destination, depending on the real situation, and some other special conditions when applicable.
So just to be clear, if a rider performs more than a set amount of trips per hour or per shift, are they entitled to access an additional payment?
We don't calculate by hour or by shift. It calculated, not trips. We do have, rewarding programs, but we don't calculate by hours or a particular shift or.
Can you explain to us what those reward programs are?
We are happy to provide you a written reward program document after the meeting, if possible.
On notice, that's fine. Can I just ask? You said you charge riders an administration fee as well as you charge restaurants an administration fee. What is the administration fee that you charge riders?
10%.
Okay, of what?
Of the whole delivery income for the delivery income.
So a rider's entitled to a percentage of. How are they remunerated? Do they get a fixed fee per trip? Do they get a percentage of the bill? Like, how does it work?
We do have a fixed fee calculation, by kilometers, and we're happy, because I'm not I might not be the best person to explain the whole system. I look after compliance, but don't look after operations myself. Therefore, we're happy to provide you with more information if needed.
Sure. I'm going to ask one more question before I probably pass to Mr. Shubich. As well. Question is in respect to the workforce, do you provide the opportunity for your riders to either bargain with you directly about what their remuneration is or bargain with you collectively about what their remuneration should be?
What do you mean by bargaining with us?
Sorry. Well, effectively, for a rider, is their level of remuneration effectively on a take it or leave it basis? Or do you actually allow a rider to come and talk to you about what they think they should be paid, either individually or as a group?
Currently, our delivery users accepts, the commission structure they are actually getting. Not commission structure, sorry. The delivery income, and we are happy to take any information from the drivers if they have any requests. We do have communication channels created, both in app as well as in social media. We do allow people to talk to us, but we haven't been receiving too much negative feedbacks around how our structures is set up.
Okay, I'll pass to Mr. Shoebridge, and then we'll go probably to Mrs. Housos.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you both for your attendance, all three of you for your attendance today. As I understand it, Easy made some commitments to Safe Work, or some commitments with Safe Work about changes to the way in which their app would operate. One of those is a fatigue management reminder. Yes. Can you tell me how you've worked out the definition of fatigue and how that will work?
Yes, definitely. We've been participating in the roundtable, workforce meetings every time, and fatigue has always been, one of the key topics, everyone is talking about, and we perfectly understand, especially under the pandemic, it's a very hard and stressed condition for people, and what we do at Easy is we actually set up a particular function to send out notification to drivers. At the 8th hour, they've been consistently online, 10th hours as well as the 12th hours to remind them they've been online for a long time, they need to take a rest. However, in saying that, because we are an open platform and the nature of this particular economy, this particular industry actually allows our delivery users to log on with different platforms at the same time, so we cannot them or cannot determine whether they are working for someone else at the same time. Therefore, what we've been doing is send out reminders, keep reminding them, and if we see them been logging on for a long time, we might proactively contact them and suggest it's probably a time to take a rest.
But sorry, so if a rider's been for 12 hours, logged on for 12 hours, they're still able to remain logged onto the app and accept orders. Is that right?
At this time, yes, but generally, we don't have a lot of riders consistently being online for such a long time. And with our app, we do send out reminders at 8 hours and 10 hours already.
What about if someone's been logged on for 16 hours? Will they still be able to receive orders if they've been logged on for 16 hours?
For this particular issue, I need to confirm that. If Mr. Ho can confirm that for us.
Mr. Ho, you know the answer is yes, don't you? That no one gets bumped off the app. You know that's the case, don't you?
Yep.
And so 24 hours, you don't get bumped off the app either, do you?
No, it's maximum 16 hours.
16 hours.
Yeah.
And then how long do they have to be off the app before they come back on again for another 16 hours?
Well,
sorry, Mr. Ho, there was a question.
May I add a little bit on top of Katie and Young's answers?
By all means.
Yeah, I think although they open up the app and keep the app locked on, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing deliveries, and they may open multi-platforms applications at the same time, and we don't know whether or not they are delivering for us just because they are logged on.
Well, indeed, the hours they're logged onto your app may well understate the amount of hours they're actually trying to work, isn't it? So it actually makes the situation even more concerning, doesn't it, Mr. Wayne? Because almost certainly the chances are to be underestimating rather than overestimating if people are logging onto multiple apps.
So from our perspective, since we cannot monitoring the drivers working for other platforms, we only consider, and we can only do the surveillance and monitoring our delivery drivers work the service hours. So I may think it's the opposite way, just from Easy's platform's perspective. We don't know because we don't know how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand you don't know how long people are logged on to other apps, but what I'm saying to you is that makes the fatigue issue even more significant, because in addition to the time people are working for Easy, they are very likely to also be performing extra hours for other apps, and it makes the fatigue issue even more significant, doesn't it, Mr. Wayne?
Up to a point, I agree with you, but if you really need that this food delivery industry's drivers to have a maybe say fatigue notice or something like that, we are happy to do that.
All right. So, Mr. Ho, can I ask you, once someone's been on for 16 hours, they get logged off, can they then just log on again, or is there a waiting time?
No, I just say if they online 16 hours, our app will remind the rest. Yeah.
I'm sorry, the app will what? Sorry,
remind the driver user arrested. Yeah.
So it'll be another reminder at 16 hours that they will remain on the app. Yeah. So they could remain on the app indefinitely, just continuing, and there'll be 8-hour reminders. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Ms. Liu, how is that in any way a fatigue management policy? How is just simply sending riders reminders, but then straight after that, sending them further orders? How is that in any way an effective fatigue management policy?
Well, to us, as a food delivery platform, we are here. We are an open platform. It is sometimes beyond our ability to really control where they have been working elsewhere. And for Easy, we don't consider waiting time. Is the time. So we consider waiting time. So if they are actively online, but they are not actively grabbing delivery jobs, for us, it's break time for them, and they have outer freedom to decide whether they would like to provide their service, to users from another platform, which is ultimately the core of gig economy to us as well, which is flexibility. So I perfectly understand where you're coming from, and I think this particular fatigue management, when we probably also need every platform to work together and more regulations to be in place, because as one company we won't be able to monitor their whole activity.
So would Easy,
apart from our platform.
So would Easy be willing to comply with regulations if they were made, requiring this kind of data to be shared to a common data source, and then having compulsory fatigue management or processes that come out of that?
Yes, we are an Australian company. We're always participating and very cooperative with any regulation to be made, and we are happy to share and compliant if there's any further regulations to be made.
My last question on this point is: have you undertaken a work health safety review of the fatigue issue? Have you got and spoken with your workforce and undertaken a work health safety review of the dangers and the procedures that are needed to protect your delivery riders from fatigue?
Well, we are working closely with Safe Work New South Wales, and there are a bit of other work that we are working together. One of them is to build on what's that called, an agreed consultation arrangement, which means we are going to involve more delivery riders, delivery users, in our future communications to understand their needs and to build up better policies going forward.
We're going to go to Mrs. Housos.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Ms. Liu. I wanted to ask you about the sacking of a food delivery driver who raised concerns about worker safety in Brisbane earlier this year. Can you explain why that worker was sacked?
Firstly, I probably need to address our Easy Brisbane is a franchisee city, therefore it's actually not controlled or managed by Easy Australia head office. So we are also participating in the investigation process, and there are very limited information I'll be able to enclose here, because it's not managed by us.
So what requirements do you have on your franchisees for them to provide a safe working environment for their delivery drivers?
I believe every state has different requirements, and we are working with them closely to find out, if there's any improvements they need to make. And I'll be more than happy to provide you with more information after the hearing, if specific, information is needed.
Well, this has been publicly reported that a worker was sacked after raising concerns about worker safety. What is your response to that?
From what we hear, as we have always we have also been talking with other media inquiries as well. From what we've been hearing, is there is other issues involved, but there is privacy issues involved there as well. So I don't feel comfortable in closing this particular information here, but we are happy to provide you with further details after the hearing.
Well, Ms. Liu, there was a worker who Mr. Shoebridge has just pointed out the long periods that riders are able to be on your platform. There was a rider who specifically raised concerns about worker safety and was then removed from the platform. What are you doing to ensure that workers who do raise safety concerns aren't treated in this way in the future?
To us, for the information that we have been received from this particular issue is a little bit different from, what they have been accusing. That's the reason why I think this particular matter needs to be, we were preferred to be talked, after this particular meeting, because the information is not perfectly matching.
Ms. Liu, I'm asking you about, though, if someone does raise safety concerns, what is the process that you believe should be in place for easy riders?
Yeah, if that's managed by Easy head office at this point in time, what we normally provide our delivery users counseling, 3 counseling sessions, and we do provide them, communication channels to talk to us. So we do not, suspend or deactivate their account, straight away. They're
Sorry, Mr. Sousas, do you mind if I just ask a supplementary question there?
Of course.
Ms. Liu, you said that the action was undertaken by a franchise of Easy. How many franchises of Easy are there?
Can I answer this question, Mr.
Sure,
New?
Mr. Yes, Mr. Wang, of course.
I think there are about 10 franchisees within Australia currently.
And is that franchise organised on a city basis, or how do you decide?
Some of them are on city basis, and some of them may be the state basis.
Okay. On notice, are you able to provide us a list of who the 10 franchises?
I'm happy. I'm happy to provide you with all the with the list of all the franchisees after the meeting.
But Ms. Wang and Mr. Wang and Ms. Liu, are you effectively saying that Easy corporate or head office doesn't control the actions of their franchises?
Yes, sure. So the reason being, as a franchisor-franchisee relationship, we are only license them the software and the trademark for them to operate and manage their business. We are totally different entity, legally separate entity, and they have their own directors, and they are in charge of the daily management, and as well as the how to interact with the 3 group of users by the franchisees themselves. We are not liable for managing them.
Okay, but Ms. Liu, when you told us earlier about the thousands of people who have engaged with Easy, do you mean, are they engaged with Easy's, or the franchise or the franchisees? Are they directly employed by the corporate office, or are they employed by these 10 franchises?
Well, the 5,000 registered delivery users was calculated since Easy came to Sydney in 2017. Hence, it's over a period of time, accumulated, and for a period of time. So which does not reflect the current status. Again, I'm sorry, we don't employ them, so they registered through our.
Sure. But who are they registering with? Are they registering with your platform, as in legally you, or are they registering with your 10 franchisees?
The 5,000 delivery users we are talking about and reflect, Easy head office. Okay,
so you set the policies, therefore, around termination of people from the platform?
Yes, in accordance to the TNC, they accept when they register.
So if you are the people who are determining the procedures for termination, how is it possible that your Brisbane franchise has terminated this person when you have it's your legal power and your legal prerogative?
Ms. Daniel, so I will be explaining this question because our franchisee has its own terms and conditions. You can have a look at by going through our website, or we can provide you with the document after the meeting.
Mr. Waits, does a rider who wishes to access your platform have to enter into a contract with the franchisee or with you or with both?
If the delivery driver providing his services in the geographic region in the franchisee's area, then during his setup registration process, he need to read the terms and conditions with the franchisees, not Easy head office.
So I'm sorry, but I'm confused because if Ms. Liu said that the contract was engaged in with the platform and they are contracting directly with the platform.
Yeah, although with the platform, but we just divided into geographical regions, as we have maybe say 10 franchisees within Australia. That's why we need to ensure that as a separate legally independent entity, we need to make sure they have their own terms and conditions, not all drafted by Easy or Easy's lawyer. Easy's lawyer.
Final question, because I've very rudely interrupted Mrs. Fissos, I'll pass back to her. But Mr. Shoebridge was asking you extensive questions about fatigue management policies and other workplace health and safety. Really simply, who is actually in charge of setting the policies that Mr. Shoebridge was talking about? Is it the corporate head office or is it the franchisees?
For New South Wales, specifically, Sydney is, operated, mainly by our head office. So therefore, I was the one as the compliance manager, interacting with Safe Work New South Wales, and these policies was definitely communicated through the head office. And once we have, new policies in place, we will share these documents with our franchisee cities for their consideration.
But you don't compel them to follow your policies.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to answer this question.
Who is? Like, if head office in Sydney sets a policy, does Easy in Brisbane have to follow it when it comes to something like fatigue management?
I believe Queensland and New South Wales probably have, separate, laws and, safe work authorities as well. So we respect them to work with Safe Work Queensland, instead of we giving them command straight away.
Sorry, Mrs. Fissos, if you wanted to finish.
No, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask, you just said, Ms. Liu, that Sydney is mainly operated by the head office, by Easy's head office. Do you have a rough idea of how many franchisees are operating in Sydney?
I think we will provide you with all the information about the franchisees after the meeting. But as far as I know, roughly is about three. But the accurate information will be provided after this meeting.
Okay, so there's approximately 3 franchisees that are operating under the Easy banner in Sydney, and each rider, the terms and conditions will depend on which franchisee they have signed up to. There's no standard terms and conditions. There's no requirement from head office about minimum fatigue management or what the arrangements are for the driver. Is that correct? Lou?
Again, I'm not, I normally do not associate with our franchisee cities. However, to my understanding, with Melbourne and Sydney, Victoria and New South Wales specifically, is dominantly, managed by Sydney head, Easy head office. Therefore, in general, they are following all the policies that they should, follow all the policies that the head office distributed to them.
Okay, Ms. Liu, you said that riders are charged an admin fee of 10% per delivery. Is that the only admin fee that riders who register with Easy head office are charged?
Yes.
So what about a $400 upfront registration fee?
Again, this is not, our policy. We are all from our understanding, it was a deposit, but I'm very sorry because I don't associate with the franchisee cities that much. Therefore, I won't be able to answer you this question.
Mr. Wang?
Mr. Wang, are you able to answer that question?
And you mean 400 deposit for what? Because I've never heard of it. As to a headquarter, as to our headquarter.
Okay, it's been reported that riders wishing to ride with Easy are required to pay a $400 upfront fee. You're not aware of
No.
that, Mr. Wang?
So
okay,
Mr.
Mr. Wang,
Wang, Yep.
That's fine. Mr. Wang, can you explain whether your head office covers riders who would be in Chatswood?
Chatswood. Okay, that's too operational, and I need to check our backend system to see whether or not our is our headquarter or the franchisees cover that area. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm not the best person to answer that question.
Well, perhaps you can take that one on notice. Ms. Liu, are you aware of head office providing, I think we spoke about this earlier, a bonus payment to riders who complete a certain number of deliveries?
We used to have a bonus system, yes, and been working with Safe Work New South Wales, and we have already updated this particular system to a point and level system that has launched, to Sydney, which it has been also reviewed with Safe Work as well.
Okay, and can you explain then about an incident that occurred in Chatswood, if you're aware of it, where two riders actually got into an altercation that resulted in a rider being stabbed over this $50 bonus payment?
Yes, we are aware of that. From our understanding, it happened, at a time both of these delivery users were not on job. So it's after they have already both got offline, from Easy, and there is a conflict between them, and one of the drivers stabbed the other.
Well, that's not what's been publicly reported, Ms. Liu. What's been reported is that they were caught in this conflict because they were desperately trying to get the $50 additional payment because one driver had completed 32 deliveries and needed to complete 33 in order to get that $50 additional payment.
In fact, in our records as well, which we can also provide you with the as per evidence, and that particular order they were arguing about has been allocated to the driver, and the driver has actually got his bonus. There is a argument between them that we are aware, in which we also has reviewed our order distribution process, which I can quickly explain to you if needed.
Maybe on notice.
I can also, we can provide you with this document.
I'm mindful I've taken much time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can
I just ask very quickly, are riders for your platform covered by any insurance?
Yes. So considering the nature of relationship between Easy and the drivers, platform and users, so we don't buy work cover for our delivery users. But we always put driver safety as priorities. Therefore, we have purchased the group PI and PA insurance from the company called Point Insurance for our delivery users at the company's cost. Yes.
Can we on notice we've asked this of other platforms, but can we on notice get a copy of your policy or at least an explanation as to what it covers?
Yes, definitely.
Can we also on notice get how many claims have been made on the policy and how many of them have been resolved in favour of a payment and how many in which a payment was declined?
Yep, that can be provided.
Have you ever had a rider die or suffered a fatality in any reasonable connection to Easy whatsoever?
No, not on any record, no.
Yeah. And have you had any serious safety incidents?
We did have several incidents which we have also reported to Safe Work New South Wales, and but mainly not major, incidents.
How many
Some
notifications
of
have
them
you?
are in.
Sorry, Ms. Lee.
Yeah, I will be able to provide you with a record, that we have kept in the system after the hearing if needed.
Thank you. How many notifications have you made to Safe Work New South Wales since EASY commenced operations?
We have reviewed our incident report, system with Safe Work New South Wales very, very recently, and after we review the system, we have report one in the last month. Yes.
Had to make an additional report of one.
Formally report one. Yes.
Can we, on notice, get a breakdown of the number of notifications that you've given Safe Work New South Wales by year since 2014 when you commenced operation?
Yep, I'll have a look.
Thank you. And just on this particular question, have you been issued with infringement notices by Safe Work New South Wales?
We have.
How many?
I can provide you with that information, but up to now, all the infringement notice has been compliant.
Have you reported all incidences which you were meant to report?
To be very honest, we have been fined with once, with the incident that we haven't been reported and it's on record. And after that, we have reviewed the system, and we have been, practicing the newly agreed and updated process going forward ever since last month. So we have been recording every incident that we receive to Safe Work since last month. Yes.
So for 1 month since your commencement in 2014, we're confident. Yes, right.
In New South Wales is 2017.
Okay. And but the incident that you did not notify for which you were penalised was the stabbing incident Ms. Husos was referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Look, our time has come to an end there. You have taken multiple questions on notice, for which you'll have 21 days to provide a response from the date you received the transcript from the Secretariat. Equally, there is a chance that committee members may wish to ask you some supplementary questions in writing, for which you will also have 21 days to respond. We thank you for making your appearance this morning and for spending time with us. And we will now go on to a break for 15 minutes, which I just remind committee members we will continue to live stream. So you are encouraged to mute yourselves and turn your videos off, unless, of course, you wish to have all of YouTube see what you are doing. So thank you very much. We will go on a break. We'll be back at 11:30.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. It being 11:30, we will resume our hearings. We welcome our next set of witnesses from Mabel. Prior to us doing the formalities, can I just do a quick sound check with you, Mr. Scott, just to see that you are able to hear us?
I certainly can hear you, Mr. Mookie.
And thank you, we can hear you too. So I now welcome our witness from Mabel. I'm just going to ask you, Mr. Scott, to first state your name and your position title before taking either an oath or an affirmation that has been emailed to you by the Secretariat.
Yes, my name is Peter Scott. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Mabel. And I swear that the evidence I'm now about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Would you like to make a short opening statement?
I would. So thank you, Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to appear today. I co-founded Mabel in 2013 in response to the experience of my elderly parents who lived in Wagga Wagga, where I grew up. They were struggling with home care provided by a large traditional provider and the daily changing roster of workers. It was clear they wanted to choose people from their community, people they could form a relationship with that would allow them to live on their terms with dignity. From the outset, the guiding principle of Mabel's approach to aged care and disability support is that we are a safeguarded marketplace that offers choice. That is choice for support providers, nurses and allied health professionals who want to choose their hours, services, rates and their clients, and also choice for consumers who want to select the person who enters their home and also want maximum say in the design of their care. Mabel is not part of the gig economy. Mabel does not set rates, allocate jobs, or dictate terms. It does not take advantage of oversupplied and low-skilled labour markets. There is no race to the bottom. Instead, we connect people and give them the power to choose what is right for them. Instead of gigs, we enable relationships which drive better connections between clients and providers. Mabel is a leader in what we term the relationship economy. It's well understood that there is an undersupply of disability support and aged care workers in Australia, and the sector is broadly struggling to attract, retain, and develop the workforce needed right now and into the future. What Mabel does to address this problem is threefold. First, we increase the supply in the market by enabling flexibility to allow people who would not otherwise participate to do so. Second, our platform helps match carers and consumers, allowing relationships of choice to emerge, improving outcomes for both parties. And third, we facilitate more hours of face-to-face support at higher rates of pay on average, which increases productivity, consumer outcomes, and carer income. Mabel is a safeguarded online platform with an accessible environment focused on safety and quality. Our approach is built on the particular requirements of disability support and home care for person-centered support that responds to an individual's unique needs, preferences, abilities, and interests, and where relationships enable independence and counter the feeling of disconnectedness and loneliness. This is about giving consumers and support providers choice and control. It's also about making home care and NDS funding go further, enabling more hours of support, ensuring carers receive more of the money themselves, and attracting a new workforce to the sector. By enabling people to come together in local communities via mutual choice and a safeguarded, transparent, and official framework, everyone can be better off. We're proud of what we have achieved. We are open and collaborative and willing to work with governments and the sector broadly to solve these important challenges for the common good. And finally, I look forward to answering your questions today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. If you haven't already, if you're possible just to email that opening statement through to the Secretariat, that would just help Hansard. Thanks.
Certainly happy to do that.
Thank you. I just want to start by asking some, I guess, preliminary questions about the Mabel enterprise. Mabel, is it privately owned or is it publicly owned? Or
it's privately owned. It's a profit for purpose business.
Sure. And how many users or how many people seek the provision of care services through the platform?
Today it would be around 9,500 people. So
9,500, is that on a daily basis? Is it a weekly basis? Or how do you...
That would be typically the number of people engaging over a monthly period, for example.
Okay. And are they people who are predominantly requiring aged care or disability care?
It's both. It's essentially people that need care and support to live independently in their own home and community and needing to access a diverse set of services in order to do so.
And but you have been provided with a I think the default contract or by the Commonwealth Government for provision of services in the NDIS. Is that fair?
No, that's not the case. We've not had a contract with the government in relation to that.
Okay, what about in aged care?
Oh, in aged care? So in aged care, so typically the way the Mabel platform works is to connect people with people. So people with NDS funding or home care package funding that come to the platform to connect with small business providers, sole traders predominantly. The contract you're referring to was only in the context of the COVID outbreak last year and the potential for community transmission and the potential for the loss of the aged care workforce broadly. So in that context, because we had some unique capabilities, we were part of the contingent workforce solution that in the event the sector lost the volunteer workforce or the home care workforce or other aged care related workforces, this was another option for the sector if their usual workforce solutions failed.
And is that contract still in place?
It is not, no.
When did it finish?
September 30th, I believe, last year. So it was during the initial outbreak.
Sure. And if we dealing with sort of 8,000 to 9,000 people who are seeking services, how many people provide services to them through your platform?
So there's visible in search results today about 11,000 support providers that have gone through our onboarding and approval process.
Are those 11,000 people direct employees of Mabel?
No, Mabel enables small businesses, including sole traders, to be able to enter this sector and provide support to people in their local community. So small businesses, I think, have a really significant role to play to help NDS participants and people live at home because they operate locally, they're part of their community, they understand their community, they're typically quite flexible and responsive to client needs. You know, they operate with lower overheads. So we see small businesses as playing a really important role in filling the workforce shortages, but also being able to support people in communities around Australia because older people and people with a disability live everywhere.
So just picking up from your lexicon, Mr. Scott, that the people who are providing labour, you term them small businesses.
There's small businesses and sole traders predominantly, but Mabel's agnostic as to how the parties engage. So if the parties want to engage via an employment relationship, we can actively support the administration of that relationship.
So as a for-profit business enterprise, how do you make revenue?
Yeah, so the small businesses on the platform are in complete control of their own business. So they decide what services to offer, to whom, when, where, whether to take on clients and the rates they charge. So they have complete choice and control, and they agree, you know, hourly rates or fixed rates and the services directly with their clients. So when a client comes to Mabel or a consumer, they engage directly with service providers in their local community. If they agree a rate of say $40 an hour, we have a 5% consumer platform fee and a 10% worker platform fee. So in that example of $40 an hour, we would add $2 an hour and we would deduct $4 an hour. So essentially our fee would be $6 an hour, and based on what the consumer pays of $42 an hour, that's a 14.3% margin. So almost 86% of what the consumer pays ends up in the hands of the service provider.
Okay, but it's 14.6 of which
14.3% the consumer ends up paying for the service.
Okay, and are you in a position to tell us as to whether or not the sole, well, as you put it, the small businesses or the sole traders, are they performing work this as full-time work or is this supplemental income?
I think the workforce on the platform is as diverse as the people that need support via the platform. So we would have people that would be running a small business where they're looking to build out a client base that enables them to work, 40 hours a week or provide services for 40 hours a week. And similarly, we would have people that simply want to work flexibly around their other life commitments. So these are community-based services. Often the people providing these services have, family responsibilities, caring responsibilities, and they're able to work flexibly in direct relationships with their clients. And they may be looking to do, 5 or 10 or 15 hours of services per week.
Sure, but do you keep statistics about what is the typical or average remuneration that a person who is working full-time through Mabel would earn?
The statistics of what they earn, I don't have off the top of my head in terms of being able to articulate that. But what I have provided in the submission, which I think is indicative of the platform, is that on average, Monday to Friday, people offering social support and domestic assistance type services, so help with shopping, meal preparation, help around the house, things that people need to live independently. I think in the submission we indicated it was about $37.50 an hour. I think it's now about $38.50 an hour. And people offering personal care type services, so they have a Cert 3 or a Cert 4, are typically earning close to $40 an hour. And that's after platform fees.
So I'm just going to ask a few more questions before I pass it to my colleagues. But you accept, though, that in providing labour or providing a platform to facilitate the arrangement of work by people requiring aged care and disability, that does come with additional risk?
Actually, I don't accept that. I think that if you look at the NDIS as a social reform, for example, it's specifically designed to enable people to get the support they need to live a life of their choosing and to be included socially and economically and to not live rostered lives. So the legislation specifically allows and was built on the fact that people could self-manage their funding and choose registered or unregistered providers. So NDS participants, for example, can choose anyone to support them, and that's specifically contemplated to improve quality of life. So Mabel, in that context, we're not a risk enabler, we're actually a risk mitigator, because we have multi-layers of safeguards in place that allow people to have that level of choice and control intended by the scheme, but with safeguards to actually, help manage the relationships that they're engaging via the platform. So these are things like worker screening, ratings and reviews, incidents, complaints management processes, access to the latest compliance information or health orders, a pathway to learning and development. So all of these things that Mabel offers supports choice and control in a safeguarded way, and we think is critically important to driving the outcomes of the NDIS and aged care at home. And certainly within home care, Mabel operates within that regulatory framework. So somebody coming to the platform with a home care package still has an approved provider that hosts that funding, is responsible for the quality outcomes, but they're also supporting people to have more choice and control over the individuals that come into their lives in very personal ways and the diverse sort of needs of people in the sector.
So look, my last question before I pass to my colleagues, how many people per year would you have either exclude from offering their services on the platform because they're not qualified? Or alternatively, how many have you had to remove in the wake of any complaints or incidents?
Yeah, so I guess the broader answer to that question is, if you offer personal care on the platform or nursing services or therapy services, for example, you'll need to evidence qualification. So in personal care, it's a Cert 3 or a Cert 4, an equivalent qualification. With nursing services, you have to provide your APRA registration number, which we check with the APRA database, for example. So there is a qualification level of screening for those services. For other services that are important to people that live independently, help with shopping, meal preparation, companionship, engaging in their community, you wouldn't need a specific qualification. You will need police checks, working with children checks, reference checks, for example, but you wouldn't need a specific qualification for those entry-level services. So our goal is to enable, say, in a rural community, somebody on a nearby farm to be able to support somebody on a nearby farm with accessing their community, buying groceries, for example, and then allow those people to upskill through professional development and accredited training opportunities so they can broaden those services over time and potentially become approved for personal care. With regard to removing people off the platform, in instances where, for example, they breach the NDS Code of Conduct, which applies to anyone providing a service to an NDS participant, whether they're an employee or a sole trader, registered, unregistered, that Code of Conduct applies. So if there are material breaches to that or repeated breaches of that, then we would take the action of removing them from the platform and quite likely report them to the NDS Quality and Safeguards Commission.
Sure, but how many have you actually had to remove and then report?
I would have to take that on notice if I may. I don't have that data on there with me.
Would you know how many on a monthly basis? How many complaints would you receive?
Well, we have an active sort of incidents and complaints management process. So in the sense of like, we encourage people to report incidents, complaints. So I just don't have the data on that. And rather than speculate or give you the wrong data, I'd rather come back to you on notice if that's okay.
Okay, I think we'll go to Mr. Sell. Mr. Sell, you're muted.
How's that? Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. I'm just wanting to follow up on the questions that the chair was asking about the disciplinary process. Like, how does that work, and what sort of rights do, I guess, service providers or the workers have to sort of challenge any adverse decisions that you might make about excluding them from the platform?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we actively encourage people to report complaints or incidents. That's everyone engaging via the platform. And we have a team that log those incidents and complaints and help the parties resolve those incidents and complaints. So principally, those two parties are working towards resolving them, and we support them with that process. And we try and understand what the root cause of any incident or complaint was in order to continuously improve. But we would take a very measured approach to that. One of the benefits of the platform is that we're able to see what multiple consumers may have provided feedback about that particular service provider. Where if it's a complaint in regard to behaviour around a client, which can happen at time, we're able to see how multiple service providers have provided feedback on that experience with that client. So we have a rating and review process where we're able to collect a lot of information around the experience of people on the platform. And so you tend to be able to triangulate and make the best judgment you can. But where, for example, there are codes of conduct that apply in the sector, as is the case in the NDIS, then breaches of that code of conduct are serious. We might we alert people to the code of conduct and that applies to them. We alert people to the code of conduct training. If they provide evidence they've done that training, it's on their profile. If there is a breach, that wasn't material, we would ask that they do that training and actually evidence that they've done that training. But anything that was a material breach or a repeated breach, we would have no option but to remove them from the platform and report them to the Quality and Safeguards Commission.
Sure, but how many of these workers have you excluded from the platform?
As I said before, I would need to take that question on notice because I can't give the answer.
And again, what are sort of appeal mechanisms? Let's say you've done this investigation, you've spoken to the service provider, you've spoken to the client, you've reached the view that this person should be excluded from participation on the platform. What sort of rights does the worker have to sort of challenge that? If I can use the term ruling or decision.
Yeah, look, we have a team of people that make very considered decisions around this. We understand it's a diverse sector, and we want to make sure that we're collecting enough information to make the right decisions, but we're essentially also guided by the codes of conduct that exist in the sector, that they're there for a reason.
Sure, but Mr. Scott, none of that answers my question. When you make the decision to exclude a worker from the platform, what rights, if any, does that worker have to challenge that decision, or is that simply the end of the road for them?
Well, I think they would escalate it, and if there was a challenge around that, it would get escalated up the organisation, and we would make the best decision we can, balancing the welfare of all parties. We want to balance the welfare and the rights of everyone that engages via the platform. So we are not heavy-handed around this. We are not unthoughtful about the best way to proceed to safeguard people that are engaging via the platform.
All right. Well, can you provide us any documentation you've got around these processes? Because I'm still not getting a very clear picture from you about what happens when Mabel makes a decision to exclude a worker, whether the worker has any rights of appeal or, how many opportunities they have to put their case. It doesn't really matter what the answer is. I'm just interested to know what it is.
Happy to
I'm
take
not hearing it from you.
Happy to take that.
Okay. Now, in terms of the payment, so your customers, the person purchasing the services, they pay the money to Mabel. Is that correct?
So the Mabel platform, what happens is they document an agreement via the platform if they reach a decision to engage in services. Once a service provider completes a service, they will log that via the platform. So they'll log the service. That will go to the consumer for acceptance or rejection. So they will work out whether they have any issues around the service that's been logged. As soon as that's approved, the platform will generate an invoice collection on behalf of the service provider, and the platform will collect payment on behalf of that service provider. So It's actually an entity called Mabel Payment Services that collects payment on behalf of the service providers on the platform, and that allows us to collect payment from however the consumer holds their funding, whether it's through a particular approved home care provider, whether it's through a particular plan manager, whether they're self-managing their NDIS funding. Payment will be collected from the consumer's source of funds after we verify that source of funds will pay the invoices generated by the platform. And we do a payment run to workers every day for all invoice amounts collected the prior day.
Okay, so consumer pays the money to you, you pay the money to the service provider.
Yeah, as agent for the service provider. So the platform simplifies that because consumers could be coming with different types of funding, with different plan managers, paying privately. So it's a service that makes it easier for those small businesses to verify that the clients have funding and a willingness to pay for these services, and simplifies the collection of that payment because of the ways these sectors operate.
Okay, and if any of the service providers are injured, during the course of providing this work, does Mabel have any kind of overarching insurance policy, or is that a matter for them as I think you used the term, a small business provider to look after their own injury insurance if they're injured?
Yeah, no, we've been quite thoughtful about this. In fact, when we first opened up the platform and onboarded the first 50 workers in December 2014, and then in January started to enable people to come to the platform, we worked to put in place, on behalf of the support workers on the platform, the providers on the platform, insurance policies that covered, public liability, personal accident, professional indemnity, and medical malpractice cover. So if they're providing service via the platform, they have the benefit of those policies. There is information about those policies, widely available on the platform. They were provided by Zurich Australia initially, and now provided by Berkshire Hathaway.
Are you able to provide to the committee any documentation just giving us a sense of the benefits that policy provides?
Yes, as I said, there's a link on our platform to all of the information around insurances, and happy to provide that in a summary to the.
Can I just supplement that by asking how many people have made claims?
Again, claims history is relatively positive, as we've always thought. When people are empowered and taking responsibility, running their own small business, they tend to rise to that opportunity. And so the claims history, I think, has been relatively good, but I just don't have that data and have to come back.
If you don't have the data, Mr. Scott, I accept that it's your view that it's good, but it's hard for us to just take you at face value if we haven't got the data.
Yeah, but I don't want to give you the wrong data, so it's not data I have with me today, but I'm happy to provide it.
Can you give us an estimate as to how many people would be claiming per month, per year?
Just take it on notice, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm just pushing.
Happy to take it on notice and give you the right data. I would rather not speculate and give the inquiry the wrong data.
Sorry.
No, Mr. Chair, that was actually the end of my questioning, so that was a good time.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Mallard now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Scott, thank you for your submission. I apologise for being a bit late to this. There's 2 parallel inquiries plus overlaying meetings. It's getting pretty hectic today. From your submission, I note that you're small business. You're essentially providing a digital platform for small businesses as opposed to individuals, and you're providing a service that's different to dropping off pizzas. You're providing a very intimate, human-based service in terms of care at people's homes and so forth. Do you just want to outline that issue of small businesses that you're supporting in the platform? And I also want to go to the issue of your competitors and what model they have.
No, happy to provide an answer. As you would be aware, the workforce shortages in these sectors has been described as chronic, right? So there is, I think the direct care workforce in aged care has to go from about 240,000 today to almost 1 million people by 2050. I think almost 80,000 support workers need to enter the disability sector in the next few years in response to the NDIS. And the actual people and services need to be much more diverse than what we've had historically. So we are talking about a fundamental social reform that shifts disability support. For example, support to live. One person with a disability described it to me like this, and I think it's powerful, is the old system was about support to live. The system under the NDIS is support to live a life, a good life, and to be included. And so the types of support needs to shift, and the types of people. So it might be support to live independently, to find a job, to study, to pursue my passions. And so this is all about engaging a new workforce, and the NDIA is really trying to change the perceptions of disability support work. So we know that there are people in communities across Australia willing to support people in their community if they can do it flexibly and on their terms. We know there are a lot of people that are recent retirees that have enormous life experience that they can share with a person with a disability who wants to live a good life. And so opening up this sector to small businesses and sole traders, we think is actually critically important to the success of the scheme, the success of consumer-directed care in home care. And that small businesses have these incredible capabilities around, operating locally, knowing their community, being flexible and responsive, being creative because they've got niche businesses, operating with lower overheads. And so when people talk about where is this workforce of the future going to come from, and they talk about immigration being the only solution, we're also saying, no, the workforce will come out of communities everywhere if you offer them empowerment and the ability to be valued and earn more and have flexibility. And so opening up this sector to small business, which is the backbone of the Australian economy, I think is critically important. And so Mabel offers a technology platform, a data safeguards platform that enables small business to enter this sector. It's a marketing channel for them. It's a safeguards framework. It's an administrative, creates administrative efficiencies. It's a pathway to learning and development. So that's the model. And I would say that in these sectors, mixed models and diverse models are critical. People have diverse needs. People that want to provide support have diverse needs. So we need mixed models so that everyone gets a chance to participate with choice and control. And so that's the model we're really focused on, and we think it plays a critical role. I think without models like Mabel, you will struggle to find enough people to staff the support that is needed by older Australians. You won't find the diversity of people that people with a disability need to live a good life.
I was on the a year or two ago, the NDIS inquiry, and noting that the services in the package that you can negotiate could include artists or renovations to your house or gardeners. Is that sort of area you're going into?
Yeah, I think that most people perceive disability support or aged care as more the clinical piece of that, the personal care piece of that. Yeah. But specifically in the Aged Care Royal Commission, they're talking about quality of life. People want to live a life of meaning and purpose in their own home and still want to be engaged. And so the support people need in the home care package can be everything from, I still want to be able to go weekly to the bridge club I always used to go to and meet my friends. I don't want to be left alone. So finding somebody that loves bridge that can go with you, or I still want to be involved in my church on a Sunday. So finding somebody from my church that can take me to church and is really part of my community is critically important for that quality of life and to avoid this loneliness and disconnectedness. And it's the same for disability. People want to live a life of meaning and purpose and inclusion, and that's different for everyone. So if I have a passion for music, and I'd love as a person with a disability to go to a music gig when we hopefully finally can, then you'd rather a support person that truly shares that passion and you do those things together. And so you might have a bigger team of people doing very specific things for you, but it's certainly not all about personal care. It's about the support you need to live a life independently, be included, to live a good life.
Mr. Chair, cut off if I run out of time. I do want to ask, I think one of the concerns coming out of the gig economy is the depersonalisation of the interaction of the worker with the platform, which seems to be some sort of remote entity, and the consumer. Now, I note in your submission essentially saying you're not really what we would call traditional gig economy provider. You're providing an intimate human service. So at your organisational level, what is the level of human engagement with the platform and the providers? And secondly, related to that, how do they flag? Because I heard this in some criticism of this platform or of this notion of the platform. How do they red flag? Say someone does go with someone to the church, but then says, "Well, there's a depression issue," that needs to be dealt with. How do they red flag that for another provider to pick up on?
Yeah. So I guess there's a few questions there that I'll try and make sure I cover. But I think one of the first things to understand is the different nature of platforms. Just because they're a platform, they're online, they operate very differently. And so it's generally understood, and certainly the Victorian On-Demand Workforce Inquiry teased this out really clearly. There's generally platforms that are more vertical in nature in the way they operate versus horizontal. So a vertical platform is typically the rideshare platform, or the food delivery platform, where the platform itself is inserting itself between the users and they're setting the terms, including price. They're dictating the terms of the engagement. And that's very different to the horizontal platforms, which enable the parties to connect directly. So again, when a consumer comes to Mabel looking for support, they're not engaging with Mabel directly, they're engaging with small business service providers in their community that they're finding through search or posting jobs, and they're working it out together. But what Mabel wants to do is to let people know that, we're only a phone call away, in the sense of if they need help navigating that platform, they can call, and there's a support team here that will provide that level of support. If you're a service provider on the platform, they belong to close Facebook groups. They're regular in contact with each other. In fact, there's really interesting, very functional discussions about what people should charge and how to value themselves. So they're obviously connected to other providers and often work in teams. So the platform's quite different. And fundamentally, it's not a transactional side. It's not about, one-off transactions. It's about relationships that form on the things that matter to people. And I think that's very, very different and important to the outcome for, both parties. And again, it's all about choice. There is the shortage of workers in the platform. So if you want to engage in the sector, being an employee of a care organisation, there's plenty of opportunity to do that. There's a shortage of workforce, but we're also enabling people choosing to engage in a different way to come into the sector. And, keeping in mind, for example, that many of the consumers coming to the platform, for example, with a home care package, have an approved provider that is responsible for those care outcomes, that does have a care manager working on the individualised care plan, in keeping in contact with that consumer, and actually can have a login to the Mabel platform. They're connected to their clients using the platform. They're connected by their clients to the service providers. They're engaging. They can see shift notes. They can be informed of incidents, complaints. So they actually can support the client.
Ms. Ballard, I'm just conscious that Mrs. Housos is also wanting to ask questions as well. Is it okay if we go to her now? There is still some more time to come back if we need to.
No, I defer to your judgment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Housos.
Thanks very much. I've just got a couple of questions. Thanks for your time, Mr. Scott, and for your submission. I wanted to ask, could you monitor, you talked about the process of a 5% consumer charge and a 10%, I missed the name of it, the 10%.
The provider platform fee, the consumer platform fee, 5%, and the provider platform fee, 10%.
And the provider. Do you monitor those rates to ensure that they're to award wage?
So we don't set rates on the platform. We're not trying to dictate rates, but what we see is service providers being very capable of setting their rates in conjunction directly with their clients, like any other small business. And what you can see are those average rates that I've shared in the submission, which, over time continually increase. So one of the, I guess, somewhat criticisms of some of those vertical-oriented platforms I talked about earlier with food delivery and rideshare is often the provider of that service can't advance themselves. They can't change the terms of their engagement. So often they're forced into squeezing in another delivery, for example, to try and advance themselves. Whereas, because they are genuinely running their business via Mabel and often outside of Mabel, they are able to invest in their learning and development. They are able to delight their clients, to get positive ratings and reviews and raise their rates. So they are able to advance themselves. And so it's a model that's allowing people to value their services and to set those rates directly.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Scott, but so you don't actually monitor the rates that are being paid. And you talked about how you do checking for police checks and for other various checks, but you don't actually monitor those rates that are being paid.
So what we do is, by the terms of use, we ensure people don't engage at less than $25 an hour as a layer of protection. But also what we're trying to recognise is the diversity of services that are engaged by the platform. And it relates to what I said earlier. It's not just about personal care or people that fit under, you know, if they're employed, fit under an award. This can be somebody, you know, providing companionship to a neighbour. It can be somebody engaging in sports with a young boy with a disability, a uni student kicking around a football after school or taking them to watch a football game on a Sunday. It can involve some, you know, gardening. It can involve, you know, personal training. So there's a wide diversity of services on the platform, and we're trying to give the community as much flexibility as possible to agree how they engage and the rates they engage. And what's clear is, you know, consumers really value the people that support them. They want them to be valued. They want them to be fairly paid. There is a shortage of workforce, and that's why we continue to see average rates rising.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Scott. Can I just ask one more question then around the ongoing relationship between consumers and between providers on Mabel's platform? Do you do any tracking of that? Do you map to see whether most of your providers or your workers have a longer term relationship or whether it's a shorter term relationship?
I think it would. We don't necessarily track the length of relationships as such because it's a diverse community that engages. So, for example, and these are real examples, right? If I'm with a person with a disability and I'm traveling to Brisbane to attend a family funeral, I might be engaging somebody to support me in Brisbane over that weekend. So that might be a very short-term engagement versus I'm living in my hometown and I'm building out a team to support me. Some of the supports may be on a particular basis where I want to engage somebody to help me prepare myself for work. That could be a 3-month process of how to write resumes, what to expect, versus somebody that might engage somebody for ongoing personal care. And it varies. And in some cases, people with a disability really value a stable team. And in other cases, relationships might expire naturally over a 6-month period. So it's a diverse set of needs and services. And so it's difficult to draw a conclusion. It's not traditional personal care and only limited to that, although that can be a component of it.
But you can't provide us with any insights about what the average length of the engagement would be?
I honestly cannot provide you with that. I could take it on notice and see what information I can provide. But again, it's just difficult because to draw any specific conclusions because of the diversity of services that are facilitated by the platform.
I understand. Sorry, Mrs. Scott, I do just have one final question, which is, have you sought to engage with any of the relevant trade unions, the Australian Services Union, the Health Services Union, or the Australian Nurses and Midwives Association?
So I haven't had specific engagement with them. I've certainly been involved in conferences where we've been on panel discussions together, and often, you know, I think we're all on the same side in terms of improving outcomes for people that provide services in this area. It's so critical that the people that provide these services are valued and feel well remunerated and, you know, work and provide services on good terms. And certainly we're absolutely aligned around that, but also recognizing the importance of these diversity models. We will really struggle to give people a good life, to attract the workforce we need if we don't have mixed models. And we're certainly, in the way we operate our model, we're very much built around quality and safeguards, respectful of the regulatory environment, respectful of the future of this is about improving outcomes to all sides that engage via Mabel. So, you know, we haven't had any direct engagement, but certainly would be open to it.
Thanks very much, Mr. Scott.
Just to supplement, Mr. Scott, earlier on your evidence, you made the point that you facilitate the opportunity for skills development and workforce development. Does Mabel pay for skills training or workforce training for any person who uses your platform?
So we do a number of things. So one is a support provider that's approved by the platform gets access to our learning hub. So there's 140 professional development courses there that's made available free of charge, working with subject matter experts like Dementia Australia and La Trobe University, and people can get foundations in disability support through to upskilling in autism or dementia, so they can have that professional development pathway. Then we've also been working closely with the VET sector to make some of the subsidised accredited training opportunities available to small business on the platform, because the state governments are funding a lot of that training and trying to upskill people. It's a goal of government to upskill the workforce.
Indeed, but I'm wondering, because do you provide remuneration for people who wish to provide that training, or is that taking on their expense and time?
No, I think this is how small business advance themselves. They invest in themselves and their capability and skills to be able to improve the services and ultimately be better remunerated. So one of the great things, and I know you're probably aware of this, but a Cert 3, for example, only 38% of people that start those complete it. That's because they realise it's not for them. But workers on our platform running their own small business actually are very motivated to invest in themselves.
Sure. Okay. Look, Mr. Shoebridge has just joined for some questions as well, so I will just go to Mr. Shoebridge in the time that we have to ensure that he has a fair chance to ask the questions too.
Oh, Chair, actually, I'll just be another minute. I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay. Well, then I'll just ask, Mr. Mallard, did you want to ask anyone? So otherwise, I just had two other questions which I wanted to ask. Mr. Scott, is it just in respect to your interactions with workplace health and safety regulators? Does Mabel consider it has obligations under workplace health and safety laws?
So, the workplace health and safety laws, I think, are intended to make sort of risk and safety everyone's responsibility. So they're far-reaching and encompassing. So I think everyone has a...
Sure, but do you consider yourself to be a PCBU with legal obligations to act in accordance with the requirements of workplace health and safety laws? A person controlling a business or undertaking?
Yeah, so if you look at the engagement of support by a person with a disability, multiple people would be PCBUs, right? Us as the operator of the platform would be a PCBU. The provider of the service would be a PCBU.
True, but I'm asking you specifically, how are you acquitting your obligations as a PCBU each time a worker is entering the home of a person requiring care and assistance?
Yeah, so we have a role to play as an operator of the platform around work health and safety, and we've certainly done reviews that look at the risk of people engaging via the platform. We have a continuous improvement culture. We have a culture of risk mitigation and identification. All the things you would expect a company that takes work health and safety seriously from its own perspective and from the people providing service via the platform. So, for example, codes of conduct, tools that help them make an assessment of the environment they're working in, that we provide those sorts of tools to people via the platform. When you look at the Learning Hub, there's lots of courses around work health and safety that small businesses can do to upskill.
Yes, but do you have health safety representatives under those laws?
If that's a specific, because of the nature of that question, I might have to take to answer that specifically correctly.
Thank you. Have you had to provide any notifications to Safe Work New South Wales of any incidents that you've become aware of?
I'm not aware that we have, but again, I might take that on notice just to make sure I'm giving you the right answer.
Thank you. My final one is have you had to make any references to police for any criminal behaviour that's come to your attention?
Again, I would take that on notice and make sure I give you the right answer.
But are you aware of any?
I'm aware that where there has been, the only incident I can recall is where there has been a serious criminal, a criminal matter discussed with a client, and they were reluctant to report it, and we reported it because we were aware of the incident and allowed the police to decide what to do with that. That's the only incident I can recall, but I don't have the details around that specifically.
Mr. Shoebridge.
Oh, thanks, Chair. And look, I'd like to thank you for coming, Scott, and for your submission, which actually was thorough and informative. You say, though, that 50% of the providers you work with are new to the industry. How do you ensure then that they have the capacity and that the checks and balances in place to work with particularly vulnerable people?
Yeah, that's a good question. And people with disability have long been wanting to engage people from their community to support them. So one of the great things about Mabel is it is attracting a new workforce. And the workforce goes through a series of screenings. So police checks, working with children checks, reference checks, etc. They also are directed towards the NDS code of conduct training, so they learn more about the sector. And once they're approved, people are able to engage them and provide a lot of feedback around that experience. So again, when somebody's engaging somebody to share with them some skills around living independently, and it's a recent retiree, then the person engaging that support, would find it difficult to engage it from the traditional sector and may not even want to engage somebody that comes with disability training because they're actually looking more for life experience in that situation.
But I suppose I ask again, if they're new to the sector, they don't have a work history, that sounds to me like you get a police check and that they confirm that they're willing to be bound by the code of conduct. But in terms of the ensuring that they're able to provide assistance safely and effectively to the particularly vulnerable cohort, what are the checks and balances you have in place, or do you say that's not your responsibility? That's ultimately a responsibility between the client and the provider.
So again, it depends on the nature of the services. So personal care, they absolutely need to have qualifications, right? There's a high level of touch, and so absolutely need to have qualifications, and that's strictly applied. And within personal care, if you want to offer assistance with medication, you have to show that module of learning. So there's a lot of safeguards built into that piece. But if you're, and this is widely the approach in the disability sector, if you're looking for somebody with a, again, there's diverse disabilities. If you're looking for somebody that has a genuine passion for music to support you to go to a music event, then the people with a disability were saying, I don't necessarily need somebody with a qualification. In fact, I want somebody that has a passion for the things I share, and I have the capacity to judge whether that person can support me in the way I need to attend that event. There has to be, again, the NDS is founded on this, a level of choice and control, the assumption of capacity for people to be able to make decisions about their lives and their support. So we put layers of safeguard around that. But the actual judgment of what's right for you has to be with the person in that situation. And there are safeguards in place, again, if it's personal care.
I'm going to have
to... My last question is just this. If something goes wrong, do you accept responsibility?
So we have a role in terms of making sure the safeguards in place across the platform. We take that really seriously. We have a multi-layered approach. I think it goes well beyond the regulation. And as a platform, we can actually provide a series of safeguards. But the actual service provision on the platform is provided by the small business owner. And we absolutely want to do everything we can to ensure quality and safe outcomes. And that's why we take our role so seriously in how we run the platform.
Thank you. Look, I'm just going to bring this part of the hearing to an end. Mr. Scott, thank you very much for you taking the time and also for putting in a submission, which other members have pointed out has been quite comprehensive. You have taken a series of questions on notice for which you'll have 21 days to provide an answer after you receive the transcript. In addition, you might receive some supplementary questions from members as well, for which you'll also have 21 days from the date of receipt. We thank you very much for joining us. You are, of course, excused now, and I just asked the Secretariat to please admit the next set of witnesses.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I think we have now got all four of our next set of witnesses, which we obviously welcome. Just prior to us commencing with the formalities, I'm just going to do a very quick sound check of every person to make sure that you can all hear us, which is the first question. If you could nod, if you could all hear us, that would be great. Yep. Wonderful. Ms. Lang, you can hear us? Ms. Lang, I'm assuming can hear us. Great. Mr. McFarlane, can you just test your microphone, please?
Hello.
Great, thank you. Ms. Hutchins, can you do the same, please?
Hello.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes?
Good afternoon.
And Ms. Lang?
Hey.
Right. Thank you. We welcome our next set of witnesses, which is a panel of trade unions from representatives of the Australian Services Union and the Health Services Union. I will just ask people to state their name, title and position and take either an oath or affirmation as has been emailed to you. Given Ms. Lang nodded first, we'll start with you, Ms. Lang.
I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. Ms. Lang, can you please state your name and position?
Natalie Lang, Branch Secretary of the Australian Services Union.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, you appear next on my screen, so we'll go to you.
Gerard Hayes, New South Wales Secretary of the Health Services Union. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. And we'll go to Mr. McFarland, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Angus McFarland, Assistant Secretary of the ASU New South Wales and ACT Services Branch. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Hutchins.
Hello, Lauren Hutchins. I'm the Aged Care and Disabilities Division Secretary, Health Services Union, New South Wales, ACT and Queensland. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. We'll now just give each organisation the opportunity to make a short opening statement if you wish. Who would like to go first? Mr. Hayes, I think, volunteered. So, Mr. Hayes, congratulations. You please make a short opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. What we're very interested in at the moment is that technology assists the human function, doesn't replace the human function. We're starting to see around the world more interest in AI and robotics and a range of things like that. We're focused today predominantly on aged care, and we're seeing an aged care crisis that is not only being clearly identified throughout the Aged Care Royal Commission, we're now seeing it being exemplified through the pandemic on a whole range of matters that have been subject to under-resourcing, underfunding, and looking at ways of dealing with elderly Australians living in aged care without dignity, as opposed to trying to facilitate the appropriate human interaction. We're looking at different sorts of platforms that connect workers with end users without any major responsibility taken along those lines. I think we can short shoot elderly Australia only so long. I think we are at a tipping point that has been clearly identified through a Royal Commission and exemplified through a pandemic. And I think what we can do to go forward is ensure that the resourcing is in place to be able to treat people with dignity, as opposed to continually relying on platforms and other areas to deal with the financial bottom line and get people who are existing in aged care, not living, existing in aged care, to be able to be somewhat comforted. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Would either Ms. Lang or Mr. McFarland like to make an opening statement? You're on mute, Ms. Lang. Sorry, Ms. Lang, you are still on mute.
I'm not on mute now. That's working?
Yes.
Great. The old turn it off and turn it on again trick. Works every time. Thank you, committee. The ASU is the Union for Non-Government Community and Disability Services in New South Wales. This includes workers in the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I wanted to speak with the committee about three key problems that we see with the rise of the gig economy and platform providers in the NDIS. First problem, the NDIS is meant to provide 1 in 5 new jobs in New South Wales over coming years, yet the NDIS features one of the highest levels of insecure work in the economy. There are less than 15% full-time permanent jobs in the NDIS. 40% of the jobs are casual. The rest are permanent part-time. No platform provider in the NDIS provides paid leave or permanent jobs for NDIS workers. This is a particular problem when the Doherty Institute report into ending lockdowns is based on high vaccination rates combined with ongoing test, trace, isolate and quarantine. How are NDIS services, platform providers in particular, going to be able to sustain services with no leave or support for workers expected to regularly TTIQ in one of the professions with the highest occupational exposure rates. The second issue is that there's no requirement for any training or professional development under the NDIS, despite it being a heavily regulated system in many other respects. For example, there is a code of conduct that workers can be fined or banned if they breach, but there is no requirement that workers undertake any accredited training program about that code. Not only is there no requirement for training, there is no ongoing professional development for the sector that is meant to provide a wide range of services to meet the diverse needs of people with disability. How can the NDIS reach its promise when the gig economy workers in the NDIS are not supported with access to quality accredited training on the job? The third issue is that wage suppression and fraud in the system exists. Disability supports under the NDIS are priced by the NDIA based on assumptions about the relevant minimum award pay rates. The problem is that there is no corresponding obligation for NDIS agencies to pass on to their workers the minimum rates of pay. So we see platform providers in particular undercutting the minimum wage and pocketing the difference, effectively ripping off people with disability and the taxpayer simultaneously. These problems can be solved via an enforceable safety net and portable entitlement scheme in the NDIS. Portable leave, especially isolation leave in the COVID world, is critical for all NDIS workers to access. It could be implemented via portable leave schemes that already exist in New South Wales and other states. Portable training would also provide workers with the opportunity to accrue training credits with TAFE as they work in the NDIS to build training and qualifications over their career. This would strengthen the NDIS and the supports available to participants. And finally, a simple regulation that required NDIS agencies, including platform providers, to pass on minimum wage increases to their workers. That would ensure that wages are not suppressed in the disability sector, and it would level the playing field between platform and traditional providers, most of whom already pay award minimum rates. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Ms. Lang and Mr. Hayes, if possible, can you email a copy of your opening statement, if you have one, to the Secretariat? That would just assist with Hansard. Thank you. I'll just kick off with some basic questions. Ms. Lang, you made the point that there are, as you put it, platforms that are undercutting the provision of the minimum wage in the NDIA. Which platforms are you specifically referring to?
There's a host, and it's an ever-emerging field. Unfortunately, a number of those platforms were given particular prominence during the COVID pandemic last year when the federal government promoted them on their website for surge workforces. So I'm speaking about platforms such as Mabel or Higher Up, for example, and there are a host of others.
Mr. Hayes, is it your view that the platforms pose a similar or present a similar problem in the aged care sector?
Yes, I think our view would be consistent with Ms. Lang's view, that particularly platforms like Mabel, when they're charging 10% service fees and taking no real responsibility for the engagement of the employee or any ongoing issues for the employee or indeed the end user, are a major concern going forward.
It's the case, is it not, in the aged care sector and the NDIS, that if a person is engaged through a contract of employment, they're remunerated on a time basis? By the hour?
Yep.
Yeah, it's not on a trip or a performance basis, is it? Or
that's not piecework.
No. And can you explain to us what the difference is between structures that remunerate people according to effectively piecework versus minimum hour, in terms of whether or not that results in all workers being paid for all services that are performed?
So what we see in the NDIS is that there is a very significant proportion of the work that's undertaken by NDIS workers that they are not remunerated for at all. That often it's simply the direct face-to-face work that they are being paid for. But we know that issues like case notes, reviewing people's support plans, behaviour support plans, restrictive practices are of course prohibited in the NDIS, except for where they are encompassed in a behaviour support plan. So for workers to be able to execute their duties with a level of compliance with regard to the regulation for things like the Code of Conduct, then there is a lot of work that needs to happen prior to and after that direct face-to-face service provision. And those are the areas that we're seeing workers not being remunerated for.
Mr. Hayes, can you explain to us what it means for an aged care an elderly person in need of aged care to have access to services that are provided through effectively piecework?
What we're seeing is in aged care, and it's been sort of clearly identified that there's a lack of follow through, and as I indicated, resourcing in aged care. So having these sorts of platforms coming in as an agency or a backup perspective, you're barely getting engagement, let alone getting the full follow through in relation to the residency. It's been raised recently by the Health Minister that aged care residents, this is their home. So taking people out of their home is something that is sort of destabilising for aged care residents. So also bringing people in who are not are fully understanding of the routine and those sorts of things is a major concern as well. So what we're seeing effectively at this point in time is that not only is it difficult to get agency work, but if people are coming in relation to some of these platforms, bare minimum is being done. The follow through, the reporting, the proactive work in relation to identifying risks, hazards and so forth, or indeed reporting on any kind of clinical or observing any kind of mental health change is just not there, and it becomes a very transactional relationship, and that is not something that the aged care residents or indeed the aged care industry is going to be able to deal with in the longer term.
Just finally, before I pass to my colleagues, did the panel or any members of the panel have the opportunity to see the evidence that was provided by Mabel prior to this session? No. So to the extent to which the view that we heard was that they provide a platform, which I guess is typical to other platforms, in which they provide the opportunity to connect people in need of help with, for want of a better term, small businesses, sole traders and other entrepreneurs who are practicing their business skills. Is that a fair way of characterising the provision of labour through these platforms?
Lauren Hutchins might have a good view on that and a comparison, actually.
Ms. Hutchins?
Absolutely not. I mean, in terms of the work that's being performed, to say that this is... Mabel have given evidence, and I believe it was in the Royal Commission, where they described those entrepreneurs as their actual customers. They have, let's be very frank about this. These are care workers who are providing the most intimate care to people in their homes, or as we saw last year, in COVID-positive residential care facilities, which is incredibly dangerous workplace for both residents and for workers. To say that this is just small businesses setting up to sell a service is absolutely a very convenient definition on their part, and it allows them to negate their responsibility to both the worker, and let's be honest, the worker, and the end care recipient. They can just say, all we're providing is some IT here, and we have no responsibility to either client nor worker.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, if I can add, we also need to consider this from the frame of what services are being undertaken here. We're not talking about discretionary spending on a meal. We're talking about really essential services. That's why the government funds those essential services. That's why the governments fund aged care and disability as governments should. The issue is when we see the commoditisation of work and of service delivery, we see the buck being passed about who takes responsibility for ensuring that work is carried out to an adequate standard, that we have a whole safety net that wraps around really vulnerable members of our community who rely on these services. Whose role is it to be looking out for where there is potentially shortfalls in the quality of care that's being provided? Who is it that's able to look out and advocate for the needs that are perhaps being overlooked by vulnerable people who rely on these services? This idea that I'm simply a middleman and there's small business entrepreneurs at the other end is actually fairly negligent when we think about the down the river implication of quality services for people who are relying on quality NDIS and aged care services from their government.
I'm going to invite Mr. Pearson if he has any questions to ask now, and then we'll probably go to Mrs. Housos and then Mr. Shoebridge.
So just for some clarification, so we have the provider. They engage with a person who's seeking service, and then they engage the service to be given. is there any monitoring or feedback that is obtained from the recipient of the service by any external independent body? And also any independent body who oversees the quality of care that's provided by the worker?
One of the sorry, Mr. Hayes. One of the issues that we see in the NDIS is there's a significant gap in the regulation of the scheme. There is a Quality and Safeguards Commission. There are registered providers. There are also non-registered providers, which is what we largely see in operation in that platform gig-based service provision area. We can't have regulation and compliance with professional and quality standards to be something that you opt into or you don't opt into when we're delivering really essential services to vulnerable members of the community. I think that puts everybody at risk.
And I think it's fair to say that aged care is exactly the same, that there is a quality oversight in terms of a commission, but getting to that point on a micro level is very difficult. And we've seen recently on the South Coast that we've had issues with one aged care facility, couldn't get agency staff at all due to where COVID is now, relying on some of these platforms. These platforms, people have not turned up, or if they have turned up, they've chosen not to go through with the contract, given that they were concerned about what they were facing. So that doesn't get escalated necessarily through a commission. So these matters will happen on a daily basis, and yet it doesn't get elevated. And we have concerns that if there's not good oversight, good regulation, it becomes a situation where it's totally uncontrolled and it becomes between two individuals, and ultimately whether that is highlighted to a level, more than likely not.
And just another question, which you raised, why isn't the contract, what doesn't the contract include not only the face-to-face care of the client, but also the documentation that's required to ensure that anybody else who comes to care for them can see a management plan or care plan, etc. So why isn't the agency of the view that they should pay for documentation as well as the actual face-to-face care? To me, it would just seem automatic and necessary.
I guess I don't disagree, but we do need to again look at the implication of not asking for not asking for documentation and not keeping records in place. To go to Mr. Hayes's point, trying to step out and say, oh, it's simply a matter between the individual participant and the individual person delivering the services. We're actually talking about two people who are both quite vulnerable in their own ways. We're talking about a worker who's quite vulnerable in terms of the regulation in which they work in terms of the low pay and precarious nature of their employment. If they're in a situation where they're, contact traced and they understand as we move to phase B of the national plan for reopening our community, if that worker doesn't have paid leave, they're in quite a vulnerable position in terms of their own income and their own livelihood. So you've got a worker who's particularly vulnerable. You then have an NDIS participant who's particularly vulnerable on the basis of health, on the basis of access to other community participation, on the basis of access to advocacy. So it is a real problem that essentially those who are connecting the worker and the NDIS participant are not taking responsibility to ensure that we have what is an enabling environment for safety, for compliance and professional standards.
I am conscious that there are multiple members with questions, so we might go to Mrs. Housos if she has to go now. I think you put your hand up first, or otherwise we'll go to Mr. Searle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel for your submissions. I wanted to touch on, I think, was a point Ms. Lang touched on, which was particularly in the COVID pandemic when there's there's a lot of health and safety issues in the provision of aged care anyway, and of course in the provision of disability care and people's homes. What implications does the sort of Mabel model have, and this is to the panel generally, have for work health and safety for workers? Because it seems that there is no one supervising the performance of work or ensuring any kind of workplace safety standards or plans are in place. If each of you would like to address that.
This is absolutely one of our most significant concerns about this model of service delivery. Work health and safety has to be paramount in any workplace, but especially a workplace where you're delivering very personal services in a very high risk environment to very vulnerable people. We don't see any active role being played by the providers, the platform providers, with regard to the ordinary risks that you would see about, what's happening with the steps in and out of the residence, and is there a handrail, the things that we've all come to assess for every other workplace we deal with. But especially in a COVID environment where what we have seen based on the National Skills Commission's mapping of occupational risk of exposure and proximity to exposure of COVID-19 is that disability workers, disability support workers, have one of the highest occupational exposure rates in the Australian economy. Not as high as a dental hygienist, but otherwise extremely high rates. We are talking about people who could potentially become super spreaders, who would become super spreaders to amongst a cohort of our population, many of whom will not be able to get vaccinated because of contraindications. Those who do contract the virus will often have comorbidities when they're receiving NDIS services. So this is a real work health and safety crisis for the workforce, but also for NDIS participants. And I would wager, and I would argue, that the New South Wales government provides $3.6 billion of funding every year for NDIS services into the national scheme, and the federal government are the funder. I would hope that our government at both the state and federal level would see that they have a responsibility in ensuring the health and safety in a COVID environment. And we would suggest that a new and additional paid leave entitlement, regardless of an employee's status, so regardless of whether they're employed by a traditional NDIS provider or a platform provider, those workers would need to have paid test, trace, isolate and quarantine leave. Otherwise, we're going to see a massive blowout of transmissions that are going to occur in our community and in our community of people with disability.
Mr. Hayes, what about your part of the industry? What are the impact for workers and clients?
Look, I think it's very similar to what Ms. Lang has indicated. And my big concern here is that there's no oversized governance or regulation for people. So effectively, if you want to swipe left or swipe right, we will connect you with the person, and then the protocols, the standards, the requirements of good clinical care are not there, and they're just subject to the individual. In home care, that is a real concern, similar to what the disability areas are in home care. And we're seeing also now, because of the lack of retention and attraction to aged care residence areas, that people do not follow the protocols, do not follow the standards that are set by the organisation, and in fact can get through part of a shift, or as I said before, get to a shift, don't like what they're confronted with and just walk away. So at the end of the day, for the resident, that is a major issue. But for the worker themselves, it's really a matter for them to support their own, professional standards, their own professional interests in relation to workers' comp and those sorts of things. And clearly, they're not in a position where they're paying 10% premium on the minimum wages that they are to be able to absorb those sort of costs.
Well, just on that point, we heard from Mabel today that they charge a commission, if you like, from both the customer and the worker. The worker pays, I think, 10% of their earnings to Mabel to have access to the work. What implications are you seeing for worker pay? Are workers working through these kind of platforms actually receiving less than the statutory minimum pay rates?
Absolutely, they are, and it's really it becomes a race to the bottom at the end of the day. And the only other thing I can think of is when you have negative auctions, who's going to do it for the lowest price? Now that is not good for the worker. The worker then has to undertake a whole range of, potentially insurances for themselves. They have to do a lot more work to be able to make ends meet, which is not going to give a good quality control and the ideal outcome that we would want, particularly in these vulnerable settings. And I can only think it's pretty good work if you can get it, that you take a commission off both ends because you just join people up. It's quite remarkable that governments can entertain this, employers can entertain that a premium is going to a group of people so they can have an app to, there's other names for those apps. And the reality here is that there are vulnerable people at the end of this app, and it's not like something you should be doing on a Saturday night.
My last question, which was really to do with what do we do about this? I mean, clearly the award system is being undermined by these sorts of situations, and I'm conscious that a Senate inquiry interim report has recommended giving a tribunal broad powers to make binding pay determinations in non-standard forms of work. Is that the sort of thing we need to look at in this inquiry as well?
Can I say I think there's a bigger picture in this, and this is a picture of where we are going to in the future. It's one thing to have places like Airtasker and that who'll knock a nail in or put a board up for you, and if it falls over, it does. This is something that's totally different, and as Ms. Lang said, these are vulnerable people. There are very invasive things that are going on in the privacy of someone's home. I get major concerns in relation to people's safety, whether it's the worker or whether it's the person utilising the service. That oversight of regulation and governance just is not there. And this is something that I think that, whether, as indicated before, the Aged Care Royal Commission has shown a range of deficiencies. The pandemic has it just showed quite clearly how exposed we are. And I think so it's about what can be done now to ensure the future and not let this opportunity go. Otherwise, I think we will get to aged care and ageing population. And if we go down this path, people will be living in their own excrement, and that will be the way it goes. And we accept that as a society. I think that's a real point here.
I very quickly also add that in the NDIS context, the government funding contemplates workers being paid appropriately under the award. The pricing methodology is transparent, it's there, you can view it. The line items as they are priced contemplates workers being paid appropriately under the award, the Social Community Home Care and Disability Services Award. It also contemplates other entitlements that workers should be enjoying, including the pricing methodology suggests that workers would receive 100% of the benefit of long service leave and funds accordingly. Where the failure is in the lack of regulation that requires that funding to be passed on to workers in the form that it is contemplated. The methodology says these are the award entitlements. This is the award wage that the worker should be receiving. These are the other entitlements they should be receiving. But the system fails to then demand by regulation that is passed on to the worker. So you have the middlemen appearing into this marketplace. They are adding no extra benefit or value to the marketplace. They are not adding safer services. They're not adding more professional development. Instead, they are actually just taking a whole lot of that funds that should be there for the worker, that if it went directly to the worker would be adequate. And what we are seeing is the proliferation of either state-sanctioned wage theft or wide-scale fraud against the taxpayer. And if we don't have that regulation in place, that's what we're going to continue to see. It's the exploitation of a working poor in this industry, and that is not how you deliver a great social reform such as the NDIS that we're all deeply committed to.
Go to Mr. Shubich, please.
Thank you all for your evidence and attendance today. I might go to you, Ms. Lang, first. We saw last year with the COVID infections in Victoria how a casualised workforce, particularly in the aged care sector, was actually one of the key vectors for spreading COVID, and how indeed the casualised workforce creates a whole series of work health safety issues for the workforce, but also for the people they're caring for. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Much for that question. It absolutely is one of the biggest risks, if we were looking at this from a risk management point of view, which I sincerely hope the government would be doing. One of the greatest risks to the safety of people with disability, NDIS participants, is the casualised nature of the workforce. We know that many platform workers will be visiting, upwards of 20, 30, even 40 clients in a week to deliver services. And that's what happens when you're paid, for an hour of service here or there in these platform providers. I will go to, though, I am deeply troubled and I am deeply concerned about what is going to happen as we enter phase B of the national plan right now to transition away from widespread lockdowns. The Doherty Institute report is exceptionally clear that as we move into phase B, we are going to see an increase in community transmissions of COVID-19. Those transmissions we've already seen where they exist are largely fueled in a home environment, which is how NDIS services are provided, and in workplaces, which again is NDIS services. The Doherty Institute report is exceptionally clear that if we start to move away from widespread lockdowns, we need high rates of immunisation and we need a comprehensive plan of test, trace, isolate and quarantine. I do not believe that the way the NDIS sector is currently arranged, it is in any way going to be able to deliver a TTIQ approach as is called for and required by the Doherty Institute report. If we do not have a TTIQ paid leave entitlement that is portable for all NDIS workers, this is going to be an absolutely devastating circumstance that the next time I think we get together, it will be, in a royal commission when something's gone terribly wrong.
Thanks, Ms. Lang. Does any other witness have anything to add to that?
I just might add to that just quickly, in terms of aged care and home care, only 54% of the workforce can identify as permanent. And of that permanent staff, 96% of those are part-time arrangements. So the issue isn't just necessarily the casualisation of the workforce, it is low-hour contracts that drive workers into multiple employment settings, including Mabel. And we saw that play out in real time in Victoria with the number of aged care workers who were exposed at work because of working across multiple sites. But compounding that issue, particularly in aged care, are the incredibly low wages that are afforded to both permanent, casual and contract staff. That means that even if you were working full-time hours, and not that you've got a full-time job, let's be honest about that, you're a part-timer working full-time hours, you need to work across multiple employers just to make ends meet. In this last outbreak in New South Wales, the federal government has funded single site arrangements in residential aged care so that a worker is to work in one site, but that means disclosing how many hours you work. We had one member who came to us fearful of telling her multiple employers how many hours she worked in a fortnight in order to access that funding. She worked 155 hours in a fortnight across 3 providers because she needed to make ends meet to live in metropolitan Sydney. So compounding the issues of the Mabels of the world and the casualisation are wages of care workers across both aged care and disability.
And of course, Ms. Hutchins, you then have the fatigue factor if you're working those hours and the ability to provide a high level of care if you're working with such fatigued workers. I assume that just exaggerates those problems.
Absolutely. And we saw the evidence in the Aged Care Royal Commission of an incredibly stretched workforce. And let's be honest about this, those 3 employers, none of them asked her how many hours she's working at her other places. It worked in their benefit to have this part-time worker working multiple hours for them. And at the end of the day, she's having to go from one job, literally changing out of one uniform into another uniform to provide care to the most vulnerable and the most, exposed group in terms of really bad outcomes from COVID.
And the population that's been helped and assisted by your members, people with disability, elderly, people who are elderly and frail in particular, they also tend to be some of the most economically deprived in the community. And that, do you have any observations about how that adds to their vulnerability? And I note that the recent reporting that showed that, in fact, poorer Australians are 4 times more likely to succumb to COVID than other Australians. Ms. Lang, do you have any observations about the vulnerability of the cohort?
Absolutely. I think that's been very well documented, the particular vulnerability in terms of succumbing to the worst outcomes of COVID. I have to admit, when I was reading the Doherty Institute report, the part that was really upsetting me is in the table that says, this is how many fatalities we still expect when we reopen. like those numbers in that table are human beings, and I'm sure everybody in this forum now knows between us that the people who are going to be those numbers in those tables are going to be people who are frail, elderly and frail, who are going to be people with disability, with comorbidities and with challenging underlying health issues. I don't feel comfort on the daily press conference when we hear how many people have died overnight. I don't feel comforted when that is qualified with a statement that, oh yes, but the person had an underlying health issue. That doesn't give us comfort. That says to us that we are talking about people who are dependent on quality NDIS and aged care and health services. So if we allow insecure work, a lack of regulation of the workforce and a lack of paid leave entitlements to proliferate COVID infection amongst this cohort, I'm not going to be comforted when the daily press conference continues to tell us of escalating numbers of people who've succumbed to the virus overnight, but they had underlying health issues. That's not acceptable to us.
So it would be fair to sum it up as a really volatile mix of the extremely vulnerable part of the population that's been served by your members, together with an extremely vulnerable workforce, and in fact that's if you like almost a multiplying effect of the dangers, especially in a COVID environment.
Absolutely, and to take your earlier point, Mr. Shoebridge, about the financial impact as well around the financial vulnerability of NDIS and aged care recipients. We're not talking about consumers who've got a big war chest that they can draw upon to exercise choice and control in the sense of, but I will purchase the more expensive, safer service. That doesn't exist. We're talking about people who are reliant on government funding. The amount that's in that funding package is the amount that's in that funding package. So I'd really appreciate if we could look at the help that's needed to ensure the amount that's in that funding package was required to flow to the worker so that we could have some security and stability in the service delivery.
We're just going to go to Mrs. Housos, who has now overcome her connection issues. So over to you, Mrs. Housos.
Thanks very much, and apologies for that earlier. Thanks very much to all of the witnesses today. This has been incredibly valuable. The main question that I had was that it seems as though there is a clear distinction between the work that we have been talking about through most of this inquiry with delivery drivers and the nature of that work, and the fundamentally different nature of the work of the members that you represent. That the fundamental part of that relationship is a caring relationship, and as I say, it's an ongoing relationship. Do you think that the nature of that work, perhaps first to you, Mr. Hayes, and then Ms. Lang, is actually incompatible with this kind of platform-based economy?
It is totally incompatible. If we want to treat our elderly as commodities, sure, you can do this, but there's no there's a major outcome failure. We've been down this path prior to getting into these sorts of platforms just through contracting out. And I think I mentioned it the last time I appeared that one group who would just supply people, would not pay appropriate rates of pay, would not have leave, would have people work 7 days a week, would not have group certificates, would not have pay slips, and would be paid in cash. Now, this is if we let a deregulated industry fly, this is what happens. Now, if we take that now a step further, that you can just do all that electronically and have no responsibility for the individual at the other end of that, there is a real concern there. And you're absolutely right. These are not people that, we put on shelves or work at Bunnings who if you drop a can, well, you get a dent. If you drop a resident, they die. And so it gets also to that point with residential aged care is about fragile, vulnerable people who are insecure, who need constant care and need their constant surrounds around them. So having a sort of a workforce that comes and goes and may be interested or not is not going to be helping the last days of these people. So I think there's a really serious issue in terms of being able to be a platform that you can just connect people for whatever reason, as opposed to connecting people to have a relationship. And I would sort of draw the point that many of our members sit with the aged care resident as they're dying and hold their hand, because not only are they're not a client, it's like an extension of their family. And that's why I think we make aged care a dignified place to grow old and to pass away, as opposed to be a commodity aspect where we'll pay someone and they will just be a part of that process.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hayes. Ms. Lang, did you have anything just quickly to add to that?
Thank you. I completely echo Mr. Hayes' points around this being a particularly high risk environment of service delivery, but I'd also add this is skilled work, despite the best efforts of some to try and ensure there's no regulation so we don't recognise it's skilled work. It actually is incredibly high skilled work. The Quality and Safeguards Commission has recently undertaken a really impressive piece of work, which is the NDIS capability framework, where they have sought to articulate and really put down what are the skills that are required by NDIS workers from the perspective of NDIS participants. So what's an NDIS participant expecting to receive in service delivery? And what is the skill set then that a worker needs to have to be able to deliver that? And what's the knowledge base that they would need to have? It is incredibly skilled work. The capability framework is incredibly comprehensive. It starts at the same fundamental starting point as the NDIS Act. This is about Australia meeting their obligations under the Human Rights Convention of the rights of people with disability. The starting foundation of skills and knowledge for the workforce is a fundamental understanding of that human rights basis. What is restrictive practice? What are other ways of delivering services? This is highly skilled work, but it's also government funded. And so the difference where we can see between private sector places and what we're seeing here is really like that third sector, the community sector, which does have some private sector providers coming into it, is we are talking about government funded services. The government controls the purse strings, they set the price. The NDIS participant has to work within that pricing package to purchase services. We need regulation. The idea that this is an open free market is farcical. The idea that NDIS participants who are seeking services has the financial ability to drive the innovation and influence what kind of service level they wish to receive is farcical. We're all dependent on the government funding. We just need to make sure that the government funding is regulated to get to the end worker, because that would deliver secure jobs. That would deliver decent entitlements. That would deliver the leave that workers need to deliver their services safely without the risk of, to go to Mr. Shoebridge's and Mr. Hayes' earlier point, without the risk of fatigue and Ms. Hutchins' earlier point. It would be without the risk of widespread COVID infections around the community because of people working for multiple employers and not having test, isolate, test, track, isolate and quarantine leave. So I think those are the distinguishing differences.
Thank you, Ms. Lang.
At times, sorry, can I just ask one final really quick question, which is that we've talked about some of the other gig economy providers and putting additional restrictions on them. I asked Mabel earlier today, do you check that people are paid under the award rate? They do police checks, they do some other checks, but they don't check award rates. Do you think that that's something that we should require workers to, these kind of platforms to actually have to be checking?
Absolutely, otherwise it's just a race to the bottom, and these platforms will consume vulnerable people, vulnerable workers. It's just an absolute disgrace. If there's no bottom standard, God help this country.
Alarming state of affairs if we could possibly accept that a once in a lifetime social reform like the NDIS, which is built on the foundations of meeting our obligations under human rights principles, that our minimum standard is a police check and nothing more.
Thank you. That brings to an end our public hearings for today. Can I just thank this panel of witnesses for the evidence that you've given? I don't think anyone actually did take any questions on notice in this particular session, but if you did, the Secretariat will provide it to you and you'll have 21 days to return an answer. It's possible that committee members might have some supplemental questions for you as well, which will be delivered to you by the Secretariat, for which you'll also have 21 days. With that, I'm going to bring our public hearing to a close. I'm going to excuse the witnesses. We will now go offline, but I'd ask members to stay on for our deliberative meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.